Have you ever woken up one morning, looked around and wondered, is this really all there is? I've asked myself that question hundreds of times. But then I'd shake my head, convincing myself that stability is its own kind of happiness. My life had no grand twists, no dramatic relationships, no impulsive decisions leading to disastrous consequences. It was just me, my books, and the perfectly predictable repetition of each day. My name is Claire Robinson. I'm 31 years old, and if you're looking for an extraordinary story filled with epic adventures or passionate love affairs, mine is probably not what you want to hear. But if you want to know how an ordinary woman got swept into a whirlwind she never saw coming, then stick around. I work at the Crestwood Public Library, a small place tucked away in the quiet fields of the Midwest. It's not a glamorous job, but I love it. The towering bookshelves covered in dust, the faint scent of old paper in the air, the soft rustling of pages turning, it all makes me feel safe. I like the order of this place. No one expects much from a librarian. I don't have to try to be interesting or force myself to fit in. My days follow a simple routine. Wake up at 6:30 a.m., make a strong cup of coffee, throw on my favorite worn-out cardigan, and walk to the library. I work until 5 p.m., putting books back in their proper places after someone has carelessly misplaced them, sometimes helping a child find their favorite storybook. Then, I return to my small third-floor apartment in an old building, the only place I truly feel I belong. Friends? I have a few, but none too close. Most are married with kids, wrapped up in family gatherings on weekends. Things I don't have, and I'm not even sure I want. Romantic relationships? Never a priority. I've dated a few times, but no one ever had the patience to understand someone like me. And I never felt the need to change just to please someone else. I'm not lonely. At least, that's what I keep telling myself. I have books to keep me company, imaginary worlds to escape into whenever reality becomes too heavy. I don't need anything else. Or maybe, I just want to believe that. But life has a way of shaking things up, even for those who think they have everything under control. And I was about to learn that in a way I never expected. That day started like any other. I arrived at the library earlier than usual, unlocked the doors, turned on the soft yellow lights, and slowly walked through the aisles, checking if any books were out of place. Everything was in its proper order, just the way I liked it. Quiet, predictable. But the silence didn't last long. Around midday, as I was focused on updating the list of new arrivals, a voice spoke from behind me. "Excuse me, could you help me find a book?" I turned around and nearly startled. Standing in front of me was a tall man, relaxed in posture but carrying an effortless confidence, the kind of confidence I wasn't used to. "What genre are you looking for?" I asked, keeping my voice as steady as always. "I'm not sure. Anything you think is worth reading." He smiled. A casual, easy smile, with a hint of playfulness, as if he was waiting to see how I would react. I narrowed my eyes slightly, wondering if this was some kind of joke. No one came to the library asking a stranger to pick out a book for them. But his gaze held no trace of amusement, just curiosity. I cleared my throat, pushing away the unexpected awkwardness bubbling inside me. "Well, do you prefer fiction or nonfiction?" "Surprise me." I nodded, took a step back, and turned toward the classic literature section. I pulled a book off the shelf and handed it to him. "Try this one." He took it, flipped through a few pages, then looked up at me, his green eyes lighting up as if he had just discovered something intriguing. "Thanks, Claire." "Thanks, Claire, I'm Jack. Jack Sullivan." Jack Sullivan. His name echoed in my mind as he walked out of the library with the book in his hand. I assumed, like most visitors, he would read it and disappear. I was wrong. The next day Jack came back. The book was great. "Got any other recommendations?" He leaned against the counter, his interest in me unmistakable. I handed him another book, then the next day, and the day after that. Jack didn't just come for the books. He came to talk. At first, our conversations revolved around literature. But gradually, they expanded. Small stories, personal interests, things that made us laugh. Jack had a way of making any topic engaging, as if he could turn even the most mundane subject into something fascinating. He carried the confidence of someone who wasn't afraid of being misunderstood. And most importantly, he listened. In a way no one ever had before. I didn't know what drew him to me, a quiet librarian with nothing special except a room full of books. But his attention never felt forced or fake. 1 week passed, then 2, then 3. I grew used to Jack's presence, to the point that, on the day he didn't show up, I found myself staring blankly at my computer screen, realizing I was waiting for him. And I wasn't sure if that was a good thing, because I had never let anyone into my life so easily before. But somehow, Jack Sullivan had. I once thought that marrying Jack was the best decision of my life. He came into it like a fresh breeze, pulling me out of the monotonous loop of my old routine. Jack made me laugh, made me feel special, and, most importantly, he listened to me. After a year of dating, his proposal came naturally, sincere yet effortless. And I said yes without a moment of hesitation. Our wedding was held on a warm autumn afternoon. Nothing extravagant, just a cozy ceremony with a few close friends. I believed in what we had, convinced that marriage would only make things better. But I was wrong. The first signs of change came slowly, like cold drafts slipping through the cracks of a window. Subtle yet enough to make me shiver. Jack was no longer the gentle man I had known. It wasn't an overnight transformation, but little by little, I started noticing the distance in his eyes, the indifferent remarks and, most of all, the silence when I needed him the most. At first I thought it was just work stress, temporary exhaustion, but then I realized these weren't fleeting moments, they were becoming the norm. And then there was his family. I had met them a few times before the wedding, but our interactions had been nothing more than polite small talk. After the wedding, everything changed. "Claire, have you thought about getting a real job?" Margaret, Jack's mother, asked during a family dinner. I set my fork down, keeping my expression neutral. "The library is a real job, Mother." "Oh, of course," she smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "But you know, Jack has such a promising career. A man needs a wife who can support him, not someone who spends her days lost in books." I glanced at Jack, hoping he would say something. But he simply kept his head down, focusing on his plate. As if he hadn't heard a thing. That night, for the first time, I felt like a stranger in my own home. Jack's father, Richard, rarely voiced his opinions as openly as Margaret. But his disapproval was just as evident. He would ignore my comments during dinner, or chuckle quietly whenever Margaret said something condescending toward me. Things only got worse when they started showing up unannounced. One afternoon, I came home from the library and found Margaret standing in my kitchen, her coat draped over the chair like she had lived there for years. "Oh, Claire, you're home." I was just tidying up a little, the house was a bit messy. I tightened my grip on my bag, forcing myself to stay calm. "Since when do you have a key to my house?" Jack gave it to me. Just in case. She smiled, smug and satisfied. I turned to Jack, waiting for an explanation, but he simply shrugged. "It's not a big deal, Claire. Mom just wants to help." But I knew. This wasn't help. This was control. And the worst part was that Jack wasn't on my side. Each passing day, I felt more and more like a guest in my own marriage. Bit by bit, I was being pushed to the sidelines, turned into an outsider in the life I once believed was mine. I had thought Jack was the only person who truly saw me in my quiet world. But now, I realized, he had never really seen me at all. I remember that day so clearly. The sky was gray, heavy clouds looming over the town, but I still felt happy. Jack and I had been engaged for a week. I was never one to believe in fairy tale weddings or love stories drenched in romance. But when Jack knelt before me, ring in hand, his eyes filled with certainty, I didn't hesitate. We were going to build a life together, That was all that mattered. But then, like a slap of reality, that conversation happened. Claire, I need to talk to you about something important. Jack's voice was unusually serious as we sat on my small apartment's couch. I remember how he didn't quite meet my eyes when he said it. What is it? I asked, my heartbeat quickening with an uneasy feeling I couldn't name. He pulled out a folder from his briefcase and placed it on the table in front of me. My parents. They want us to sign a prenuptial agreement. I blinked, the words feeling so foreign that it took me a moment to process what he had just said. A prenup? I repeated, my voice sounding distant, almost detached. It's just a formality, Claire, Jack rushed to explain, his tone careful, almost too light. My parents are very cautious when it comes to finances. I don't care about it, but they do. They think that if we sign it now, it'll prevent any issues down the line. I stared at the papers before me, my fingers absently tracing the edge of the folder. What do you think about this? Jack was silent for a moment before letting out a small sigh. I don't care about money, Claire. I love you, and I want to marry you. But if this will give my parents peace of mind, then what's the harm? I bit my lip, my eyes locked on the first page of the contract. I had never cared about Jack's money. I had no idea how wealthy his family was, and frankly, I never needed to know. I loved him for the late-night conversations, for the way he made me laugh, for the evenings he patiently listened to me talk about the books I adored. Money had never crossed my mind. But in that moment, as I stared at the contract in front of me, a realization hit me with absolute clarity. They didn't trust me. Who did Jack's family think I was? Some gold digger, a woman waiting for the right moment to take everything if things went wrong? I took a deep breath. I didn't want a stupid contract standing between Jack and me. I didn't want to make this a bigger issue than it had to be. So, I picked up the pen and signed on the blank line at the bottom. Done. My voice was steady, controlled. Jack looked at me for a moment before reaching out, gently squeezing my hand. Thank you, Claire. I know this wasn't easy. I gave him a small smile, but something inside me had already begun to crack. I didn't tell Jack that the moment I signed that paper, another thought had crept into my mind. If he truly loved me, if he truly trusted me, then why did we need this at all? I can't remember the last time I felt at peace. Life with Jack had become suffocating. His parents' unannounced visits, their scrutinizing stares, the subtle yet pointed remarks, they all made me feel like a stranger in my own home. Jack, who had once been my emotional anchor, had become distant. Every time I tried to talk about what was happening, he would shake his head and tell me I was being too sensitive. I endured it. I kept telling myself that love was more important than these small conflicts. But my body didn't agree. It started with occasional headaches, then dizziness. Each day I felt more exhausted. The endless nights of insomnia drained me, and no matter how hard I tried, I felt like I was drifting further away from my own marriage. And then, on an ordinary Tuesday morning, I collapsed, right in the middle of the library. When I opened my eyes, the bright white lights of the hospital ceiling made me squint. The first thing I felt was pain, a dull, aching sensation spreading through my body. I tried to remember what had happened, but everything was a blur. Miss Robinson, how are you feeling? I turned my head to see a middle-aged doctor standing by my bed, his face carrying a mix of concern and professionalism. What's wrong with me? My voice was dry, barely above a whisper. You've suffered from severe exhaustion. Prolonged stress and pressure have taken a toll on your health. He studied me for a moment before continuing in a gentler tone. You need to rest. More importantly, you need to remove yourself from whatever is causing this decline. I let out a dry chuckle. So I need to escape my own life? The doctor said nothing, just gave me a knowing look before quietly leaving the room. I leaned back into the pillows, trying to take a deep breath, when a knock on the door pulled me from my thoughts. I turned, expecting to see Jack, or worse, his mother. But the person who entered was a complete stranger. A man in a well-tailored suit, carrying a leather briefcase, stood at the foot of my bed. His expression calm, but serious. "Are you Claire Robinson?" His voice was firm, but not unkind. "Yes. Who are you?" I sat up slowly, an uneasy feeling creeping in. The man set his briefcase down on the small table beside my bed and opened it, pulling out a folder. "My name is David Lancaster. I'm the legal representative of Mr. Henry Caldwell." I frowned. "Who is that?" David hesitated slightly, as if surprised by my question. "Henry Caldwell was your uncle." My heartbeat quickened. That name. I hadn't heard it in over 15 years. Henry was my mother's younger brother, a peculiar and reclusive man. He had cut ties with the family a long time ago, and to be honest, I had no idea if he was even alive. David took a slow breath before continuing. "I'm sorry to inform you that Mr. Caldwell passed away 2 weeks ago." I didn't know how to react. Someone I once knew but had been absent from my life for so long was suddenly being spoken of in past tense. But David wasn't finished. "Before he passed, he left his entire estate to you." I blinked, thinking I had misheard him. "I'm sorry. What did you just say?" David flipped through the folder and pulled out a document. "Mr. Caldwell left a will, in which he bequeathed to you an inheritance worth $15 million, along with shares in 3 major companies. Additionally, you are now the owner of a mansion on the outskirts of New York, and a collection of valuable antique paintings and furniture." I sat there, completely frozen. $15 million, company shares, a mansion. Was this some kind of joke? David kept talking about legal procedures, but I couldn't hear him anymore. My mind had latched onto one single thought. My life just changed. Forever. Jack arrived at the hospital the next morning. I had expected an argument, a flood of questions about my health. But no. The first thing he said when he stepped into the room was, "I heard you just received a massive inheritance." I stared at him, a mix of shock and bitterness rising in my chest. "So the news spreads fast, huh?" I replied, unable to hide the sarcasm in my voice. Jack let out a small chuckle and stepped closer to my bed, but the warmth in his eyes was gone. Instead, there was something else. Calculation. A kind of scrutiny I had never seen in him before. $15 million, company shares, a mansion. "Claire, this is huge," he said as he sat down in the chair beside me. I crossed my arms, leaning back against the pillows. "Is that so? But tell me, did you come here to check on my health? Or to ask about my money?" Jack forced a smile, but I could see the discomfort behind it. "Of course I care about you, it's just, this changes things. We're married, Claire. Our life is going to be different now. You may not realize it, but this affects both of us." I felt anger simmering beneath my ribs. "It affects both of us? Or are you just wondering how much of it will benefit you?" Jack raised an eyebrow, pretending to be hurt. "What are you saying? I've never cared about money between us." I said nothing. Just watched him. Waiting. Jack sighed, then reached for my hand. "Listen, Claire, this could be a great opportunity for us to start a family." I froze. Start a family? I know you weren't ready before, but now things are different. You have the resources to raise a child, to give them the best life. We can begin right away. I yanked my hand away from his. "You mean I should have a baby immediately? Just as soon as I found out I'm rich?" Jack's face remained calm, but I noticed his fingers clenching into a small fist. "That's not what I meant, but let's be realistic, Claire. We're married. Having children is the natural next step. Besides..." He paused before continuing in a softer tone. "My mother thinks so too." I let out a dry, humorless laugh. "So Margaret is part of this plan too?" Jack didn't deny it. He just stared at me, as if waiting to see how I'd react. Suddenly, everything became painfully clear. I wasn't just Jack's wife. I was a tool. A means to ensure that this fortune remained within his family. They didn't want me to have a child out of love, or because we wanted to build a future together. They wanted to tie me to them permanently, to make sure I could never leave, never escape their control. I felt sick. Not from my condition, but from the sheer deception standing in front of me. "Get out, Jack." He frowned. "What?" I said, "Get out, I need to rest." Jack stared at me for a long moment, as if debating whether to argue. But then, he stood up. "Claire, think about this. We could have a beautiful family. You just need to see things in a more positive way." I didn't respond. I just looked at him, waiting. Finally, Jack let out a sigh, took a step back, and walked out of the room. The moment the door clicked shut, I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. I wouldn't let them control my life any longer. And this time I wouldn't give them the chance to. Jack came home that evening, but I didn't wait for him to talk. I had spent the entire afternoon in the hospital, thinking about everything. How he and his family had treated me, the control they tried to exert, the way Jack suddenly pushed for a baby right after I inherited the money. And I had made my decision. I wasn't going to let them manipulate me for another second. When I walked through the door, Jack was sitting on the couch, his phone in hand, but the moment he saw me, he quickly stood up. "Claire, you're home. I made some soup for you. We need to talk." I cut him off. Jack hesitated, clearly uneasy with the coldness in my tone. "What's wrong? You're still not feeling well. Don't stress yourself out." I took a deep breath, straightened my back, and met his gaze. "I want a divorce." The air in the room turned to ice. Jack stared at me as if he had misheard. "What?" "I want a divorce, Jack. I've had enough." His face went pale before quickly shifting into anger. "Claire, what the hell are you talking about? We've been married for less than 2 years. You can't just say you want a divorce like it's nothing." I smirked. "It's not me, Jack. It's you and your family. From the beginning I was never seen as a wife. Just a tool. A puppet for all of you to control. You don't love me. You love the idea that I would always be tied to you." Jack let out a dry laugh, but I saw the flicker of panic in his eyes. "You're being emotional, Claire. You need to calm down and think this through. We can start over." I crossed my arms, my voice like ice. "Start over? When? After I have a baby so I can never leave? After you and your mother control every cent I own?" Jack gritted his teeth, his patience clearly running thin. "Claire, do you hear yourself? You really think I only care about your money?" I met his eyes without hesitation. "Yes." A heavy silence fell between us. I walked over to the table, opened my bag, and pulled out a folder. I placed it down in front of him. "Do you remember this?" Jack stared at it, then his expression changed as he recognized what it was. The prenuptial agreement his family had insisted I sign. I smiled. Not the timid smile of the woman I used to be, but one filled with quiet victory. "You and your family were so proud of making me sign this, weren't you? To protect your wealth from me?" I pushed the folder toward him. "Well, guess what, Jack? This also protects me from you." Jack opened the folder and scanned the document. I watched as his anger built, the reality of the situation sinking in. He knew. According to the agreement, everything I owned, including my inheritance, belonged solely to me. Jack had no claim to a single cent. And since he had never contributed financially to our marriage, he wasn't entitled to anything from the divorce. Not a penny. "You thought you were smart when you forced me to sign it." My voice was cold. "But in the end, it's the very thing that leaves you with nothing." Jack shot up from his chair, his face red with rage. "Claire, you can't do this. I'm your husband." "You were never really my husband," I said firmly, my voice carrying a finality that left no room for argument. I picked up my bag and turned toward the door. "I've already hired a lawyer. The divorce papers will be sent to you soon. And I hope we never see each other again." Jack lunged forward, grabbing my wrist. "Claire, don't do this. We can..." I yanked my arm free. Goodbye, Jack. Then, I walked out of the house I once called home. But this time, I wasn't leaving in fear. I was leaving with a freedom I had never had before. I never knew that freedom could feel this light. After leaving Jack, I moved out of the house I once called home and into a small apartment in a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of New York. It wasn't extravagant, it wasn't flashy. Just a place that was mine. A place untouched by the control and manipulation I had endured for so long. The divorce happened faster than I expected. When I received the final papers confirming that I was no longer tied to Jack in any way, I sank into the old armchair in my apartment, took a sip of coffee, and breathed in deeply. I did it. I got out. Jack tried to contact me a few times after that. The late-night calls, the long, desperate messages begging me to reconsider. But I never answered. I had wasted too much time enduring him, enduring his family. It was time for me to live my own life. And that's exactly what I did, on my own terms. At first, I didn't know what to do with my inheritance. Suddenly, having $15 million in my bank account felt surreal. Almost unreal. But I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let it define me. I donated a portion of it to charities I believed in. Education programs, public libraries, and shelters for women escaping abusive relationships. I knew what it felt like to be trapped in a life controlled by someone else. And if I could help even one person break free, I would. The rest, I used to make a dream come true. I had always loved books. Not just because they allowed me to escape reality, but because they taught me things no one else could. And now, I had the chance to share that love with the world. I found a charming little building on a quiet street near my new neighborhood. With the help of a few architects, I transformed the space into a cozy bookstore, Robinson's Reads. Tall wooden shelves filled with both old and new books, a reading nook with armchairs and warm yellow lights for those who wanted to stay a while. I even added a small cafe counter where people could order a latte and lose themselves in the pages of a book. Before long, my bookstore became a beloved spot in the community, a child excitedly running in to find the latest comic book, an elderly man quietly picking out a classic novel, a young woman sipping coffee while flipping through a self-help book. I didn't need a luxurious life, I just needed this. A place that was mine, a job I loved, and the feeling that I was truly living, not just existing. One afternoon, as I was arranging a stack of newly arrived books, my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen, and a familiar name appeared. Doug. I stared at it for a long moment before sighing and pressing decline. I didn't need to hear anything else from him. The past was behind me, and I had no intention of going back. Pouring myself a cup of hot tea, I sank into the chair by the window, watching the afternoon sunlight spill across the bookshelves. This was my new life. A life I had chosen, no one else. Claire Robinson's story is not just about escaping a toxic marriage. It's a testament to the power of self-reliance and resilience. In reality, many people find themselves trapped in relationships where they gradually lose their voice and their sense of self, manipulated into submission. But like Claire, everyone has the right to stand up, set boundaries, and reclaim their own life. Money can change people's attitudes, but true worth isn't found in wealth. It's found in freedom, happiness, and the ability to control your own destiny. Claire Robinson's journey is one of empowerment and rediscovery. What do you think about her decision? If you were in her shoes, what would you have done? Share your thoughts, and don't forget to follow the channel for more inspiring stories about life and family. I never thought that a sudden call from my little sister, whom I had once forgotten, would be the beginning of everything I'm about to tell. It all started with a fake smile on the screen, a seemingly harmless comment, and a truth that left me so stunned, I spilled my coffee on the floor. There was a time when I thought distance would make everything easier. That leaving the US meant leaving behind the troubles, but I was wrong. Very wrong. And the truth is, family can find you, even when you're on the other side of the world. My name is Morgan, 31 years old, currently living and working in Switzerland. 3 years ago, I left California after receiving an irresistible offer from a major financial company in Europe. Great salary, professional environment, and most importantly, a chance to start over, far from the never-ending cycle called family. Before I moved, I lived in a small apartment in Pasadena. It wasn't one of those luxurious fancy places, but to me it was full of memories. It had once been my grandmother's apartment, the only woman in the family I truly respected. After she passed, she left the apartment to my mother in her will. When I graduated college and started working, my mom suggested selling it to me for a family price, $92,000. I didn't hesitate. I used my savings, borrowed a bit more, and signed the contract right during a weekend dinner at my parents' house. It wasn't because I loved the apartment so much, but because I didn't want to live with them for another minute. I needed my own space, and this was the first step to get it. After buying it, I renovated every little corner myself. The backyard was filled with lavender, and the kitchen was repainted with the olive green my grandmother loved. In the 3 years I lived there, I can honestly say I truly lived. But then the opportunity in Switzerland came, and I knew I couldn't turn it down. I signed the contract, packed up my things and moved out. The apartment was still mine, and I rented it out to a young couple to make some extra income. I left behind not just the apartment, but also the relationships I once thought were flesh and blood. The relationship between me and Lacey, my younger sister, was always cold, to the point of being suspicious. She was 7 years younger than me, and you could say we were like two completely different planets. When I was struggling in college, Lacey was still playing with dolls and crying because she couldn't have candy before dinner. When I was struggling to find a job, she was starting high school and getting involved in teenage love drama. We were never close. Since I moved out, the connection between us was reduced to a few birthday wishes, or a Merry Christmas once a year. I tried to bridge the gap, sending gifts on holidays, but I always got back either a terse thank you or complete silence. Perhaps I gradually got used to the fact that my sister was a stranger, with the same bloodline. My parents always sided with Lacey. To them she was the child who needed more attention, while I, the one who always took care of herself, was left to be. When I bought that apartment, they looked at me with a mixture of pride and relief. As if they had just lifted a heavy burden, and now they could focus all their energy on their baby. I didn't complain. The silence and distance between me and my family might not have been ideal, but at least it allowed me to live my life peacefully in Europe. No one bothered me. No one asked for anything. No one blamed me. At least until one June morning, when Lacey's name suddenly appeared on my phone screen while I was in an online meeting with a client. I don't remember the last time she called me. Maybe it was in 2020, when my grandmother passed away. Maybe it was even longer than that. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the answer button. My heart beat a little faster, not from excitement, but from a strange sense of unease creeping into every cell. I took a deep breath, pressed the button to answer, and the conversation began with a soft, overly cheerful voice. Just like the way my mom spoke whenever she was about to ask for something big. Before I could say anything, Lacey started talking non-stop, as if we were still calling each other every night to chat about everything under the sun. "Morgan, are you free? I have some good news to share." I forced a smile, leaned back in my chair, and held the phone tightly. "All right, go ahead. I just got accepted into UCLA." Her voice rang out with excitement. "And I'll be moving into your apartment next week." I thought I misheard her. "Which apartment?" I asked slowly, trying to keep my voice calm. "The one in Pasadena. I've already talked to Mom and Dad. They said it's fine. You're not living there anymore, so I think it makes sense to stay there while I'm studying. It's close to campus, super convenient, and I won't have to pay rent." I went silent for a few seconds. Then, the feeling of being pierced slowly spread from the back of my neck, down my spine, like someone had just poured a bucket of cold water over me in the middle of Swiss winter. "Lacey?" I interrupted her, my voice sharper now. "Did you just say you're moving into my apartment?" "Yeah, it's our parents', right?" She laughed as if I were joking. I tightened my grip on the phone. No, it's not our parents. I bought that apartment from them, I paid for it, signed the contract properly. It's my house, not some free place for you to stay in. There was silence on the other end for a few seconds. Then Lacey spoke, in an annoyed tone. Why are you being so dramatic? I'm just staying there temporarily while I study. You're living on the other side of the world, and it's empty, so it's a waste. Not empty. I emphasized each word. I'm renting it out. There's a clear contract. They pay rent every month. You can't just move in, like that. Oh my God, Morgan, her voice soared. You're a CFO, six-figure income. Don't tell me you need that money. I'm starting my college life, why are you being so stingy? I gripped the edge of the table, trying to keep my voice from breaking with anger. It's not about the money, Lacey. It's about ownership and respect. You don't have the right to just decide to live in a place that's not yours just because mom and dad said it's okay. But they said it's a family property. I bought it. They have no rights over that apartment anymore. Don't talk to me about family property. Lacey went silent. Maybe for the first time, she began to understand that the situation wasn't as simple as she thought. Mom and Dad? Didn't say anything to you? She asked cautiously. I scoffed. No, they didn't ask me. You're the one who called and announced it, like I'm some kind of gatekeeper. Well, I thought you wouldn't mind. You can stay somewhere else when you come back, right? I held my breath for a moment, then coldly replied. No. I'm not moving out of the apartment I paid almost $100,000 for just so you can live there for free. That's not happening, Lacey. You really are being unreasonable, Morgan. Her voice trembled, a mix of frustration and confusion. We're just trying to help you save money. I'm not responsible for helping you save money by losing my home, my income, and my respect. Without waiting for her to say anything more, I hung up. My hands were shaking as I placed the phone on the table. I tried to breathe deeply, but all I could hear in my head were her words. The blatant attitude, the disregard for my rights, and the way she used the excuse of the baby of the family needing help to impose her will on me. Just like what my parents had done all through my childhood. I was reheating pasta in the microwave when my phone rang again. The screen showed, Mom. Oh, I didn't answer. 4 more calls followed, but I let them go. But when the 5th call came in, I knew if I didn't answer they would keep bothering me. I tapped the answer button and held the phone to my ear, my heart feeling like it had thorns. Morgan? My mom's voice was sharp from the first word. Why are you overreacting like this? Why are you making things hard for your own sister just because of that empty apartment? I sneered. Empty? I'm renting it out. And that apartment isn't a family toy, I paid for it. Oh my God, Morgan, my mom almost screamed. You're living in Switzerland, what's the apartment there for? Lacey needs a place to stay, you can rent somewhere else when you come back, what's the big deal? What's the big deal? I said coldly. The issue is, you're making decisions about something that's no longer yours, then forcing your eldest daughter to sacrifice her rights for the youngest daughter. Just like you've always done. Don't talk back to me like that, Morgan. I closed my eyes, pressing my forehead. If you want Lacey to have a place to stay, then you pay for her to stay there. I'm not the backup solution for every family problem. My mom exhaled sharply through the phone. Her voice grew colder, as if I were an ungrateful child. You're being very selfish, Morgan. No, I'm just protecting my property. And if you call me about this again, I'll block your number. I hung up before she could respond. In the quiet kitchen, the microwave beeped, signaling that dinner was ready. But I no longer had the stomach to eat. My stomach twisted, as if all the suppressed emotions of years were about to burst out, not just because of the apartment, but because of the entire twisted mindset that had haunted me since I was a child. They thought I didn't need to care about my property because I was rich. They thought I was the safe choice, the one who would always sacrifice. But they were wrong. So wrong. And they were about to face a truth much bigger than they thought. I thought everything was over after that phone call, but I forgot one important thing. In my family, nothing ends with just one refusal. And sure enough, just a few hours after I hung up with Lacey, my mom called back. This time, she didn't bother to keep up the fake calmness. Her voice was like a cold knife, cutting straight through my ear the moment I hit the answer button. "Morgan," she said, without a greeting. "I just talked to your sister. You're really going too far." I closed my eyes, leaned my head against the wall, feeling the exhaustion rise up to my neck. "I know you're mad. But don't take your anger out on Lacey. She's still young, just starting college. She needs support, and you have a stable life in Europe." "Stable doesn't mean I should clean up everyone else's mess," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "And I've made it clear, that apartment is mine. I paid for it, signed the legal documents, remember?" "Oh my God, Morgan!" My mom sighed heavily, her voice now high-pitched. "You're living halfway around the world, leaving an empty house you're not even using, and you can't let your sister stay there temporarily? She's your sister! And how about the fact that both you and Lacey decided that without asking me? You think I'm some kind of ATM that doesn't deserve respect?" "Don't talk back to me," she nearly shouted. I laughed coldly. "I'm not talking back. I'm just tired of you always assuming I have to sacrifice. When I was little, it was my toys, then my old clothes, then tuition, and now it's even the house I worked my ass off to buy. Now you want to take it because your little sister needs it. You're being selfish, Morgan. Your dad and I have already spent all our money on Lacey's college. We don't have anything left to rent her a place." I froze. That was the first time my mom specifically mentioned money. "Really?" I asked, my voice as sharp as a razor. "Where did the hundreds of thousands of dollars I paid for that apartment go? You said it was used to pay for Lacey's tuition, right?" "Yes, we're not wealthy, Morgan. Do you think your dad and I want to work ourselves to the bone at our age?" I tilted my head back and let out a bitter laugh. "Well, if that's the case, it's easy. If Lacey stays in that apartment, then you can pay me rent. I'll offer the family a special discount. A blood relative deal. $1,000 a month." Silence. An oppressive silence hung in the air. Then my mom screamed as if she had been deeply offended. "What did you just say? You're asking your own sister for rent?" "No. I'm asking for fairness." "Morgan." "Oh my God. You're living in Europe, earning a high salary, spending money you can't even use. Look at your sister. She's just starting college, hasn't even worked, knows nothing. And you? Then who forced her to live on her own in an expensive city like Los Angeles? Who made that decision?" I ground out each word. "You chose a school for her far from home, then turned around and made me responsible for her? Do you not see how ridiculous that is? You really are so disappointing, Morgan. I didn't think you'd turn into such a greedy and cold person. Always calculating money. Do you even remember what family is?" That sentence, "Do you even remember what family is?" hit the deepest scar inside me. Because I once thought family was everything. I once sacrificed my dreams, worked extra jobs, and went without clothes just to send money back to them. Then, when I was finally strong enough to stand on my own, they came back, seeing me as a warehouse of assets. Emotionless, unlimited. I clenched my teeth, speaking slowly. Family is not where people assume the one with money has to give, and the weaker one just takes. I'm not a cash machine, Mom. You'll never be forgiven if you kick your sister out like that, my mom said, her voice trembling. If you do this, you're not human anymore. Well, you can keep that curse then, I said, then hung up, before the tears could start to flow. That night I couldn't sleep. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, while the rain drizzled outside. In my head, the two words my mom had labeled me with kept repeating, greedy. I was the self-sufficient daughter, never asking anyone for a penny. I bought that apartment with my own hard-earned money, and now I was being called greedy, just for not wanting to have it taken from me again. Around 2 a.m. I sat up. I opened my laptop, pulled up the lease agreement and forwarded a copy to my lawyer. In the email, I wrote, "If anyone illegally enters this apartment, including family members, I want legal action ready. This is my legal property, and I will not let anyone disrespect that anymore." I hit send with cold hands, but a lighter heart than ever before. Because now I knew one thing: if I don't stand up and protect what's mine, no one else will. I hadn't intended to call anyone. I wanted to completely cut off contact, lock all connections, and let them deal with the consequences of their impositions. But then, Aunt Sarah called. Her name appeared on the screen while I was standing by the window, holding a glass of wine, my eyes blankly staring down at the peaceful Swiss street. Aunt Sarah, my mom's sister, was the only one left in the large family I still kept in touch with. She was never loud, never intervened too much, but always listened. This time I answered because perhaps deep down I still needed someone on the side of reason. "I just talked to your mom," Aunt Sarah's voice came through after a few short pleasantries. "She's furious that you won't let Lacey stay in the apartment." I chuckled, the wine swirling in my glass. "You know why I refused. I bought that apartment. They have no rights to it." "I know. And I completely understand your decision," Aunt Sarah said slowly, clearly emphasizing every word. "But Morgan, there's one thing I want you to do. Not for your mom, not for anyone else, but for you and Lacey." I fell silent, waiting. "You two should talk again, properly. Video call, look each other in the eyes. I understand why you don't see anything wrong, but Lacey, she's been living in the shadow of your parents for too long. I think she truly doesn't know the truth." "You think she's been lied to?" I asked, half in doubt, half in sorrow. "I don't think. I know. Lacey grew up in a house where adults could twist the truth however they wanted. And you know that for sure." I sank down into the chair, deep in thought. Aunt Sarah was right. And, if I truly wanted to rid myself of this burden, at least I had to face my sister one last time. To see whether Lacey was an accomplice, or just a pawn like I used to be. That night I pressed the video call button for Lacey. She picked up immediately, her face appeared on the screen, pale, hair hastily tied up, eyes with dark circles. She didn't look like someone who had just won, nor like someone living in victory. "I didn't expect you to call back," she said, her voice hoarse. "You've stirred up a storm at home." "Right," I replied, trying to stay calm. "But today, I'm not calling to argue. I just want you to see this." I turned the camera, pointing it directly at my laptop screen. A file was already opened, a copy of the purchase agreement for the apartment, the ownership certificate, and a $95,000 transfer receipt from my personal account to my parents' account. 3 years ago. I didn't say anything. I just stayed silent, letting the numbers and legal seals speak for themselves. Lacey stared at the screen. She didn't blink, her lips slightly pressed together. Then, after a few seconds, she spoke up. "What is this?" "It's the proof that I bought the apartment from Mom," I said evenly. "They no longer own it. It's been mine for 3 years. But they said it was the house our grandparents left, that they were letting me stay there temporarily so I could work." "No, Lacey, they sold it. To me. With the money I saved up in the first 3 years after graduating. This isn't a favor, it's a transaction, very clear." She went silent. Her face grew gradually pale, as if all the blood had drained from it. There was something in her eyes that wavered. Not anger, but shock. "It can't be," she whispered. "They told me you left the house to go overseas, that you didn't need the apartment anymore. So they said I could just move in." I nodded slowly. "Now you understand why I got so mad?" I didn't know, Morgan. I really didn't know." Silence engulfed the call for a few seconds. Then suddenly she spoke, almost in a whisper. "They also told me that my tuition was paid with the money from selling the apartment. That you agreed to let me stay there to make up for it." I clenched my fist. It felt like someone had just squeezed the air out of my chest. I thought, at least they wouldn't lie to you about that. Did you? Lacey looked directly at the screen. Did you say the money from the house sale was used to pay for my tuition? I nodded. Mom just said that 3 days ago. Lacey laughed. But that laugh was twisted and painful. Morgan. I'm on a full scholarship. UCLA gave me a full scholarship because of my SAT scores and extracurriculars. Mom hasn't paid a single cent. I felt the ground beneath me tremble, not because of anger, but because of the horror. Are you sure? Sure, 100%. I even emailed them to confirm. I thought Mom was just bragging too much, but now. Lacey didn't finish her sentence. Her eyes were filled with tears. We both sat in silence, an ocean apart, yet both frozen by a common discovery. We had both been deceived. I spoke softly. Do you remember the summer when you were in 7th grade? You wanted to take a dance class, but Mom said there was no money because I just asked to buy a laptop? Lacey looked up. You bought the laptop with your part-time job money? Mom lied to me? Not just that time, many times. Lacey's face changed. When I asked to go to summer camp, Mom said she just paid for your tuition. I shook my head. I applied for the scholarship for free. I didn't take a dime from them. We sat there like we had just completed a puzzle, only to realize the full picture was a long chain of elaborate lies that spanned our entire childhood. Lacey let out a soft sob. I choked up. They didn't just tear us apart, Lacey. They used us. Against each other. Lacey nodded, her eyes still glued to the screen. I need a moment to process this. I smiled weakly. So do I. But now I know one thing. You're not the enemy. The screen brightened with the yellow light of her room. That light wasn't enough to erase all the darkness between us, but it was the first spark after so many years of being lost. Lacey quickly wiped away her tears, then looked at me, her voice choked but firm. Sis. I need to tell you everything. I nodded, my heart sinking like a snapped guitar string. Deep down, I had a vague idea, but now, I was about to hear it in my sister's own words. And the truth had never been easy to hear. Since I applied to college, Lacey began, I told Mom I wanted to work hard on my own so I wouldn't be a burden. I studied like crazy, joined social activities, did everything to earn a scholarship. And you did, I added softly, smiling faintly. Yeah. She nodded, her eyes red. Full ride. Tuition, dorm, books, even food. Everything. But Mom still told everyone that she and Dad were struggling to support me, so there was nothing left to help you. I felt my throat tighten. A chill spread down my spine. I've heard that line too, I said. When I applied for college, Mom said there was no money because she had just bought new clothes for you for your first day of school. Lacey stared at me in shock. I went to public school wearing cheap t-shirts and jeans. I still remember clearly, Mom said. We don't have money for a dress because Morgan just asked for money to buy a laptop for college. I closed my eyes. Oh God. I worked all summer that year to buy that used laptop from Craigslist. We sat in silence. But this time, it wasn't because of awkwardness. It was because the full picture had started to emerge. Every memory piece fitting together, revealing a web of lies that had existed throughout our childhood. Do you remember the summer you were denied from going to summer camp? I asked. They said they had just paid for my SAT prep course, so there was no extra money. Lacey let out a dry laugh. I remember. I was mad at you the whole summer. But now that I hear you, did you ever go to a prep class? Absolutely not. I studied with library books and free videos, because Mom said, don't waste money on those things, self-study is what matters. And Lacey lowered her head. When you moved to Switzerland, Mom said you left because you didn't want to support me anymore, that you thought I was a hassle. My heart felt like it was punched. What? Yeah. I believed that. Then, when I asked about the apartment, Mom said. It's family property. Your sister has a stable life now. It's your turn to enjoy a little. I gasped, not believing my ears. They've torn us apart by building a wall between us with lies. Lacey nodded, her eyes darkening. I thought you had abandoned me, that you were selfish. And you thought I was the spoiled one, getting everything. But turns out, we were both just puppets in their play. I clenched my fists, wondering how many times I had wrongly blamed my sister just because of something my parents had said. And the tuition, I said. I once asked why I couldn't get help for college. Mom said, your sister is smart, she can get a scholarship on her own, but I have to take care of every penny for you. Lacey choked up. When I asked to join the school dance team, Mom said there was no money because she just bought a plane ticket for you to go to Geneva. That ticket was fully paid by the company. I didn't ask anyone for a penny. We both sat motionless. No need to say more. It was all clear. Their tactic was simple but cruel. Whenever one of us needed something, they would blame the other, planting jealousy, guilt, and insecurity in our minds. They did this so no one would dare ask for anything, question anything, and no one would realize where the money was actually going. Did you ever wonder, Lacey said, her voice softening, about the designer clothes Mom wears, the times they said they went on a business trip but came back with tans? I thought they were really working hard. I swallowed. I suspected, but they always had an excuse, always a justification. I thought I was just imagining things. I thought if I spoke up, I'd be called ungrateful. Me too. I sighed. I didn't expect it. For all these years I've tried to be independent, and so have you. While they lived as if they had no burdens at all. And we lived with the obsession that we were a burden to them. That sentence sent a chill down my spine. Suddenly I remembered a series of small details. The times Mom bought so many things to fill the trunk but called it promotions. Dad often complained, "Your mom spends too much," when she wasn't around. Those trips to Florida for company conferences. But the pictures on Facebook were of a 5-star resort and seafood dinners. Lacey, I said, my voice quiet but firm, we need to know more. It's not just a feeling, we need the truth. She looked up, her eyes lighting up with a determination I'd never seen in her before. I agree. It's time to lift the veil. I smiled faintly. A strange feeling stirred within me. Not hatred, but a desire to reclaim something. The truth, fairness, and the bond between us that they had tried to destroy. And for the first time in years, I no longer felt alone. The next morning I called Aunt Sarah. I needed confirmation. I needed to know that the pieces we had put together last night weren't just assumptions. Lacey and I had been pushed into two opposing worlds, fed twisted stories, and I knew there was only one person in the family who could reveal the truth. Aunt Sarah picked up after 3 rings. Her voice was still low and soothing as always, but I could hear the anxiety in her breath from the first word. Morgan, what's going on? Why are you calling so early? I didn't beat around the bush. Aunt, Lacey and I talked. We know we've been lied to. We know our parents have been lying for years, but I need you to confirm something. A brief silence, then Aunt Sarah spoke gently. Go ahead, dear. I took a deep breath. Did Grandma send money every month for me and Lacey? On the other end was such heavy silence I thought the call had dropped, but then Aunt Sarah sighed, slowly, as if releasing a burden she had carried for far too long. Yes, she said softly. And it wasn't just monthly payments, Morgan. She also left a separate amount in her will. A significant amount. For both you and Lacey's college education. My throat tightened. But they always said there was nothing. Always said I had to take care of myself. They said they never received a penny from Grandma. Aunt Sarah laughed bitterly. Because they didn't want you to know. Your grandma loved both of you dearly. When you were little, every month she sent your mom $2,000, with the note, to support Morgan and Lacey. I saw those envelopes. Every month, For nearly 10 years. I bit my lip, trying to hold back the surge of anger rising inside me. Do you know what they did with that money? I know, Aunt Sarah replied, her voice pained. They spent it all on themselves. Your mom bought designer clothes, your dad changed cars like changing shirts, and you too, you ate discounted food and wore hand-me-downs. I had arguments with your mom about this. The result? She cut off contact with me for almost 4 years. I gritted my teeth. What about the college fund? Grandma left that in her will, Aunt Sarah said, enunciating clearly. $80,000 for each of you. She gave full control to your mom, with the condition that it be used for its intended purpose. I nearly dropped my phone. 80,000 for each of us? That's right. Grandma wanted to make sure you two got a proper education, but your mom, told the lawyer she would set up a savings account for both of you. No one checked. She passed away right after that. I stood up, pacing the room. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. So, they took everything? I whispered. Aunt Sarah paused. I can't be sure, but you saw them go to Florida 4 times that year, right? All business trips? I slumped into the chair, my eyes wide open, as if I had just realized something that reason had been denying for all these years. We thought they were trying. We saw them cutting coupons, buying things from cheap stores. But it turns out, it was all just an act? Yes, Aunt Sarah said, her voice hoarse. A performance, so you wouldn't ask, wouldn't demand, and most importantly, wouldn't suspect. I couldn't say anything else. I just heard the sound of blood pounding in my ears. It felt like all my memories, all the morals I had been taught, had been stripped away. They didn't just lie. They manipulated. They played the victim to force 2 children into a state of guilt and invisible debt. Morgan, Aunt Sarah hesitated. I'm sorry. I should have said something sooner, but back then, I was scared. I closed my eyes. I couldn't blame her. They knew how to control people. Even adults couldn't escape, let alone children. Did you keep any documents? I asked, my eyes lighting up with a faint glimmer of hope. I have a copy of the original will, Aunt Sarah said. I asked the lawyer to send it to me, because I didn't trust your parents. I still have it. If you need, I'm ready to give it to you. I sat up straight. Aunt, I need that document. And? I think it's time to face them. What are you planning to do? I clenched my fists. I'm not sure. But this time, I won't stay silent anymore. I sent Lacey the recording of the call with Aunt Sarah. She texted back with just one word, shocked. Half an hour later, Lacey called back. She spoke, as if she couldn't believe it. I just dug up some old papers from the drawer. There are a few pictures of Mom standing in front of a hotel in Hawaii. I thought they were photoshopped from back then, but now I'm sure. It's the vacation she said was a business conference in Texas. I laughed, a bitter laugh. And I just remembered, they told me they didn't have money to buy my prom dress, so I had to borrow one from a friend. Then Mom bragged to the neighbors that she bought a Coach bag for Dad's birthday. Lacey went silent. Then she whispered, they didn't just take the money. They took our youth's. I didn't answer, because I knew she was right. They stole our trust. They stole our childhood. And if I didn't do something, maybe they'd keep doing it to someone else. 2 days later, I flew back to California. The 11-hour flight felt like a lifetime. I barely slept. All I could think of was the image of my parents calmly sitting in their luxurious home, drinking tea, lying as easily as breathing, while Lacey and I fought for every scholarship, every discount item, every chance to live decently. Lacey picked me up at the airport. She didn't say much, just hugged me tightly, then drove me straight to my parents' house. We hadn't made plans, we hadn't notified them. No warnings. They didn't deserve the chance to prepare any excuses. Dad's silver SUV was still parked in the driveway. The grass was neatly trimmed. The front looked as spotless as it did in a home decor magazine. They didn't live in the poverty they had preached about for all these years. Mom opened the door. She froze when she saw Lacey and me standing there, side by side. No welcoming smile. No welcome home, sweetie, like you see on TV. Just a wary glance and her lips pressed tight in defense. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice low. "We need to talk," I said, walking straight into the house, not waiting for an invitation. Dad was sitting in his office, flipping through a newspaper. He looked up, raising an eyebrow. "Oh, look who's here," he said. "Morgan's home for a visit?" I didn't answer. I placed the bag down on the couch, pulling out a folder from my backpack, with documents already printed. Papers from the lawyer, a copy of Grandma's will, bank transfer statements, and proof of the apartment transfer. I looked straight at the two people I once called parents. No avoidance, no hesitation. "We know everything now," I began. "About the money Grandma sent, about the tuition Mom said she used for Lacey, about the apartment Mom said was still family property." The room was completely silent. Lacey stood beside me, both hands clenched tightly, her eyes bright with intensity. "And about the $80,000 Grandma left for each of us for our college education," she said. "Money that we've never seen a single cent of." Dad looked at Mom. Mom smirked. The kind of cold smirk I used to think was power, now it just seemed shameless. "You two came here just to make a scene over that?" she sneered. "Listen, that was money Grandma left for us to manage. She trusted us, and how we spend it is our business." I clenched my fists until my knuckles turned white. "Grandma made it clear in her will that it was for our tuition, not for you two to go to Hawaii, buy Louis Vuitton bags, or change cars like changing clothes." "We have the right to live comfortably too," Dad spoke up, his eyes unwavering. "You two got an education, were raised, not left hungry, and didn't have to live on the streets like homeless people. That should be enough." I froze. "Did you just say, enough?" "Yeah," he replied. "You weren't abused, you weren't beaten, you had a place to sleep, food to eat. We're not a perfect family, but no one has the right to judge us." I laughed bitterly, a laugh full of resentment. "No one's judging. But we were manipulated, lied to. For years, we lived with guilt, with jealousy, thinking the other was favored. While you two made all of it up. Every lie. Every penny embezzled. Every blaming look." Lacey trembled. "I hated you. I thought you were selfish, only caring about yourself. But it turns out, I was the one being used so you'd feel useless." Mom crossed her arms, her face icy cold. "You're talking like we're criminals, but really, you're just throwing a tantrum because you didn't get pampered." "No," I said, my voice firm. "We're awake, for the first time in our lives, and we're not here to beg or ask for money. We're here to say, it ends here." Dad let out a dry laugh. "Oh, is that so? The good little girls have become rebels now? Think you're grown-ups?" I stood up, my gaze locked on him. "I don't need your approval to be an adult. I've been one without a penny from you. And now, I'm old enough to know. Some relationships should be let go." Lacey pulled out an envelope from her bag. Inside was a copy of the will and a scholarship account statement. She placed it on the table. "So that later, if anyone asks, you won't be able to say you didn't know." Mom looked at us, for the first time showing signs of unease. "Where are you two going?" I smiled faintly. "Anywhere, as long as it's not here, with people like you." I took Lacey's hand and we walked out of the house. The house that once symbolized family, now just a cold wall of lies. No one followed. No one tried to stop us. Only the sound of the door closing behind us and a feeling of freedom. Sharp as pain. But I knew we had just done the right thing in our lives. 6 months after Lacey and I left that house, everything changed. Not in some miraculous way, not in the everything's fine sort of way, but enough for us to breathe again, using our own lungs, no longer inhaling the lies in that toxic air. I'm still living in Switzerland, continuing my high-paced job, but my mind is much lighter. The apartment in Pasadena, that once was the battleground, now has new tenants with a clear lease agreement. I cleaned it out with my own hands on a trip back to the US, as if wiping away all traces of the years I'd been exploited. As for Lacey, she's still in California, but no longer in the shadow of our parents. I helped her rent a small apartment just a few blocks from UCLA. Not fancy, no ocean view or swimming pool, but it gets morning sunlight, has a cute kitchen nook, and a balcony big enough for 2 pots of mint. She said it was the first time she'd felt like she had a home without feeling controlled. I paid the rent for the first 6 months. Lacey protested fiercely. "I don't want to be a burden to you," she said, her face flushed. I smiled. "You're not a burden. You're being helped. As someone who deserves to be loved. It's very different." In the end she agreed, but only with one condition. "You give me 6 months. After that, I'll take care of myself." And she did. She got a job at a coffee shop near school, working the morning shift starting at 6 a.m. to make it to class at 8. I once asked her why she didn't choose an easier job. Lacey just shrugged, flipping through her textbooks. "I want to build my own life, not owe anyone anything." I understood that feeling deeply, because I had once stood at that same starting point. The place where you have to tear down all the old foundations and rebuild from scratch, even if it means carrying every brick yourself. We talked almost every day, no longer the terse, happy birthday or Merry Christmas messages, but long calls, talking about class, roommates, the new coffee at the cafe, or the movie she was watching. I can't count how many times we laughed like crazy over some silly memory. Things that had been buried under years of anger and misunderstandings planted by our parents. One fall evening, when I returned to California to check on the apartment and visit her, the two of us sat on the floor, eating takeout pizza, watching a movie on her old laptop. Lacey looked at me, her eyes sparkling under the yellow light, and whispered, "I never thought we'd be like this." I looked up, "Like what?" "Peaceful," she answered. "And real." I nodded. Didn't say anything more. Just felt something melt inside my chest. Not pain, but something close to healing. Our parents no longer contacted us. After that confrontation, they sent a few long-winded messages that I couldn't be bothered to read, just attempts to justify themselves, to turn the blame back on us. I didn't reply. Neither did Lacey. We didn't need them anymore. Not because of hatred, but because we had enough to know forgiveness doesn't mean allowing someone to hurt you again. Instead, Lacey and I started fresh. No strings attached. No lies. Every month I send her a small amount for her school supplies. She accepts, but always sends back the receipt. One time, I teased her. "Do you trust me so much that you're sending back receipts, or are you worried I'll think you're spending the money on designer bags like someone else?" She laughed out loud, tears streaming down her face. "No, Morgan, I send it because I want you to know I'm not like them." That was when I realized the most valuable thing we gained wasn't the money, the apartment, or the scholarship. It was trust. The trust that, after everything, after betrayal, after all the misunderstandings, 2 kids who grew up under the same roof but always felt alone, finally found each other. And in that ruin, we built something stronger than any family bond. A real sisterhood, built on truth, pain, and the determination to never let the past repeat itself. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know where Lacey will choose to live, what she will do, or who she will love. But I know, no matter what happens, we've already survived something not everyone can survive. Betrayal, from the very people who called themselves parents. And if you ever thought that brokenness only leaves behind ruins, then I'll tell you, you're wrong. Sometimes, brokenness is the only place where you can find what truly belongs to you. Morgan and Lacey's story is a powerful reminder that not everyone who calls themselves family deserves our absolute trust. The truth is often buried under the guise of false sacrifice and conditional love, but when we dare to face it, we can reclaim our freedom and our worth. Sometimes, the greatest loss opens the door to real connections, built not by blood, but by mutual understanding and respect. What do you think about Morgan and Lacey's journey? Do you sympathize with their decision? Or do you have a different perspective? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to follow the channel for more interesting stories about family life in the upcoming episodes. There are memories that never fade, no matter how hard you try to forget. For me, it was that April afternoon when I was 8 years old, the day my parents left and never came back. No tears, no final hugs, just a glance away, and the car disappearing down the end of the road. I thought I was staying for a few days. But those few days stretched into a decade. If you ever believed that family love is unconditional, let me tell you my story. The weather was warm that day, sunlight blanketing the wooden porch of my grandma's house in Greenville, South Carolina. I remember clearly because I was clutching a beige teddy bear, the only thing left untouched from my old home. My mom didn't look me in the eyes when she turned toward the back seat. Her voice was a whisper, as if speaking louder might break her. "We just need some time to think, Liv. Be good and stay with Grandma for a while, okay?" I didn't ask anything. I nodded. Something I had done so many times it had become second nature. I thought there would be a hug, a kiss on the forehead, a promise to return soon. But no. My dad glanced in the rearview mirror and then locked his eyes on the road ahead. As I stepped out of the car, my small backpack hanging off one shoulder, Grandma was already standing at the door. She gave me a gentle smile, but I saw the sadness in her eyes. She knew. She knew I wasn't being dropped off just for a few days. Before the car came to a full stop, I turned to look back, as if I moved fast enough, I could undo everything. But the moment I reached the porch steps, the car turned around and rolled down the driveway without stopping once. "Wait!" I shouted, my little legs chasing after it for a few steps, hoping the brake lights would flash, hoping my mom would roll down the window and say they forgot my sandals. Or forgot me. But no. The car disappeared, leaving only a haze of dust behind in the golden light of sunset. I stood still, heart pounding, fists clenched so tight my knuckles turned white. In that moment, I didn't know whether to scream, cry, or collapse. That first night at Grandma's, she made macaroni and cheese, my favorite, and even lit a small vanilla candle by the dining table. But I couldn't eat. Every time she asked, I just nodded and said, "It's good," then kept stirring my spoon through the plate without taking a bite. That night, when she turned off the lights and tucked me in, I turned toward the wall and bit my lip until it bled, trying not to make a sound. But when the darkness settled in, I couldn't hold it anymore. I buried my face in the pillow and sobbed like the world had ended. And for me, it had. The next morning, I ran to the window every time I heard a car on the street. I imagined my mom stepping out, holding a paper bag filled with snacks, saying she had just gone to get gas. But no one came. A week passed. Then, a month. I kept watching the window every afternoon, silent as unfamiliar cars drove by. I learned to count my heartbeat whenever I felt disappointed. 1, 2, 3. Then I'd go back to the dinner table or the corner of my room. No one mentioned my parents. No one called. No one wrote. One time, I asked, "Grandma, did Mom say anything?" She gently shook her head, her wrinkled hand resting on my shoulder. "It's not your fault, Olivia. Some people just aren't ready to be parents." But that didn't comfort me. How could an 8-year-old understand ready? I didn't need them to be ready. I just needed them to come back. I began to dread the holidays. On Christmas, I wrote to Santa asking to see my mom. On my 9th birthday, I wished for nothing but my dad to show up. But it never happened. Once, Grandma took me to my new school, and the teacher asked for parent contact information. I lowered my head, unable to answer. Grandma had to hand over a guardianship form. I saw the pity in the adult's eyes, felt the light pats on my back. I hated it. I didn't want pity. I wanted my family. But as I grew older, I understood. They didn't go anywhere, they just didn't want me. And that's the most brutal thing a child can learn, that sometimes, the people who are supposed to love you the most, are the first ones to leave. I used to believe that what's broken could never be whole again. But Grandma Eleanor proved me wrong, in ways no one else ever had, with her unwavering presence, the warm hand she placed on my forehead every morning, and her constant belief in me, even when I couldn't believe in myself. She was the principal of Lakewood High School. A woman with neatly combed silver hair, always perfectly pressed blouses, and a voice that could silence an entire classroom with just one glance. But inside her small house in southern Greenville, she wasn't Principal Eleanor Rivers. She was the only one who sat beside me every night, patiently going over math homework, even when I got it all wrong. No one's born great, Olivia. But anyone can become great if they don't give up. Her voice was never loud, but always firm, and to me, it was stronger than any yelling in the world. Our mornings began at 6. She brewed coffee and read the Wall Street Journal, while I sat at the table, finishing homework I hadn't completed the night before. While my classmates watched cartoons, she showed me stock market updates. I didn't understand a thing at 9 years old, but she said, "Just read it. One day, you won't need anyone to explain it to you." And she was right. I still remember the first time she took me to the public library. Her hand rested gently on my shoulder as I stood hesitantly in front of the science section, where 2 boys sneered at me. "You want to know why rainbows have colors, right?" she asked. I nodded, still trembling. She bent down, eyes serious. "Then don't let anyone tell you that curiosity is shameful. Questions are a torch, Olivia. The smartest person isn't the one with all the answers, but the one who never stops asking." From that day on, I fell in love with physics. She bought me a small science kit, not a colorful toy set, but one that could actually burn your hand if you weren't careful. She didn't stop me. She taught me caution and how to respect knowledge. Every time I made a mistake, she didn't scold me or sigh. She simply asked, "What did you learn from this?" We didn't have much money. She still drove an old 2002 Ford with no A/seat that had to be started by tapping the steering wheel 3 times. Our house had only 2 bedrooms and worn-out furniture. But I never felt poor. Because she gave me something no one else could buy. The feeling of being seen, heard, and believed in. Once, I got an F in history for forgetting to turn in a paper. I was so scared I considered forging her signature on the notice. But when she found out, she didn't get angry. She just sat down and looked me in the eyes. You can choose the easy way and escape blame, or you can choose to face it, fix it, and learn something most smart kids miss: character. I rewrote the paper and turned it in. The next week I got an A. Not out of pity, but because I had truly earned it. That's how she taught me, not with punishments or prizes, but by showing me how to live with worth, even if no one else saw it but me. People often say, "I wish I had a better mom." As for me, I just needed Grandma Eleanor. Every time someone asks, "Where are your parents?" I no longer lower my head. I say, "I don't know, but I have a grandmother who's good enough for all 3 of them." When I was 10, she signed me up for free piano lessons at church. Not because she wanted me to become a musician, she simply said, "Music teaches patience. Patience helps you go far." Every night before bed, Grandma would come into my room, fix my blanket and pillow, and place her hand over my chest. "Your heart's still beating, that means you can start over anytime." Every time I fell, she'd ask, "Do you want to stay down or get back up?" Every time I cried, she'd ask, "Are you crying to give up? Or to let go and keep going?" I grew up in a strictness that was never cold, in a love that never needed frills, and in an education whose worth I only realized looking back. Grandma never promised me an easy future. She simply showed me that I could own it. And then, when I was 13, I did something that made her cry, for the first time. Not out of sadness. It was when I won first place in the state science fair with a model for a low-cost water filtration system for rural communities. She sat in the very back row, saying nothing. Just gripped my hand tightly when I came down from the stage, my face still flushed with nerves. "That's my granddaughter," she whispered, eyes wet, but smile shining. "You're just getting started, Olivia, and you'll go farther than anyone who ever left you." I used to think that kids like me, abandoned, without parents, living in a small, worn-out house with a retired grandmother, would never be anything in the eyes of the world, until the day the name Olivia Rivers echoed across a packed auditorium at the South Carolina State Science Fair, when I was 13. I nearly froze. I couldn't believe my ears when the host announced, loudly, "This year's first place award goes to the Project Affordable Biofilter for Low-Income Communities, by Olivia Rivers, student at Lakewood Middle School." My heart pounded so hard it felt like my chest might burst. I stood up, feet barely touching the ground, walking onto the stage through a wave of applause. The trophy wasn't heavy in my hands, but when I turned to find Grandma Eleanor in the crowd, my eyes blurred with tears. She stood at the back of the auditorium, in a simple purple dress, hands clasped, lips trembling but eyes glowing. She didn't jump, she didn't scream, but I knew inside her was a storm of emotion. That night, Grandma and I returned home in silence. Not because there was nothing to say, but because no words could contain the joy flooding the air. But when I stepped inside the house, I froze. The dining table was fully set, lasagna, the dish she made only for special occasions, desserts, string lights across the living room. A white poster hung between two windows, scrawled in red marker, "My granddaughter, state champion." She had invited my science teacher, a few close friends from class, even the school librarian, the one who helped me find books on water microbes. "You didn't think I could throw a party, huh?" she laughed when I stood there, mouth wide open. I hugged her tightly, nearly knocking off her reading glasses. "Thank you for everything." She stroked my hair. "No, Olivia, I just walked beside you. You were the one who moved forward. That party didn't have a DJ, no strobe lights, no 3-tier cake. But it had laughter echoing through the house, proud glances, and sincere pats on the back. For the first time, I didn't feel like the kid who was left behind. I was a girl stepping out of her own shadow. And in that very moment, sitting in a room full of people who cared for me, I realized something more important than any award. I no longer needed to sit by the window each afternoon, waiting for a car that would never return. I didn't need to imagine a hug that never happened. I didn't need to hope my parents would someday see my worth. I already had a family, not perfect, but real. Late that night, when everyone had left, Grandma sat with me in the quiet kitchen, poured me a warm glass of milk, and asked softly, "How do you feel?" I didn't have to think long. "I feel like I just won something bigger than the contest." She nodded slowly. "That's right. You just won back your belief in yourself." From that day forward, I stopped letting the past control my heart, the questions that haunted me for years. Why did they leave me? What did I do wrong? Became distant echoes, no longer able to hold power over me. I dove into my studies, not to prove anything to my parents, but to prove to myself that I was worthy of every bit of Grandma Eleanor's encouragement. I learned to speak confidently in front of a crowd, to share my projects during school panels. That quiet little Olivia from years ago had learned to hold her head high, to speak her dreams aloud, to show up. Still, I never forgot what Grandma once taught me. Success isn't just being recognized, it's knowing where you came from and choosing never to forget it. So every time I walk into a classroom, I still wear the old button-up shirt Grandma once tailored for me, and the necklace she gave me for my 13th birthday, a silver chain with a pendant shaped like an old-fashioned key. She had only said, "One day you'll know what it unlocks." I giggled then, thinking it was a joke. Now I'm not so sure. Maybe she always knew that my first success was only the beginning. She never told me she loved me with fancy words. She loved me by teaching me how to tie my shoes tight, how to argue respectfully, how not to cry in front of someone who once hurt me. And maybe that's the greatest kind of love I've ever known. A love without conditions, without birth certificates, without shared blood. Just a daily choice to stay. I turned 18 on a brilliant fall afternoon, sunlight spilling across the small garden where Grandma Eleanor used to plant chrysanthemums in lavender. The breeze was cool, but her gaze was warm, just like the first day she welcomed a frightened 8-year-old girl out of a strange car. She had made a dinner reservation at the Mason Garden, the place she once called the Spot, to celebrate real milestones. Not fancy, but every corner held a memory. From the worn leather booths to the hanging wooden lavender chandeliers. It was a cozy party, just a few close friends, teachers who had guided me through science projects, and Dr. Kate, the doctor who treated my broken arm when I was 12. After everyone sang happy birthday and finished slices of her special apple pie, Grandma stood up and pulled a reddish-brown velvet box from her coat pocket. "This is your birthday gift," she said, her voice calm, but commanding the room to silence. I opened the box. Inside was a delicate silver necklace, with a finely carved key pendant. On the back, barely visible unless held to the light, was a tiny inscription. "Trust when the time comes." I looked up, puzzled. "What does it open, Grandma?" She simply smiled, a smile both mysterious and gentle. "One day you'll know." I didn't ask further. Somehow, there was something in her eyes that made me not want to break the sacredness hanging between us. I wore the necklace that night, and haven't taken it off since. 3 months later, on what seemed like an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, my world collapsed. I had just left my applied biology class at Greenville Community College when I got a call from an unknown number. The man's voice on the other end was shaky but clear. "Miss Olivia Rivers, this is Dr. Owens from St. Jude Hospital. I am very sorry. Your grandmother passed away from a sudden heart attack." I was frozen. No final words, no warning signs. Grandma Eleanor, the woman stronger than any storm I had ever known, was gone. In just a matter of minutes. I gripped my phone so tightly my knuckles went numb. I didn't blink. My ears rang. The wind outside was biting cold, but I felt nothing except the erratic thumping of my heart. By the time I got to the hospital, she had already been moved to the cold room. I couldn't look. I couldn't take another step. A young nurse placed her hand on my shoulder, soft as mist. She went very quickly, no pain, she just fell asleep. I didn't cry right then. I just turned away and sat down on a pale bench in the hallway, still clutching the necklace with the key pendant. Trust when the time comes. Was this the moment she meant? The days that followed blurred like a foggy dream. I handled the funeral arrangements, chose her favorite flowers, lavender and white chrysanthemums, and wrote the eulogy, even though my hands wouldn't stop shaking. The turnout was unexpectedly large. Former students, former teachers, neighbors, even people I'd never met, all arriving with flowers, red-eyed, sharing stories about Grandma I had never heard before. She paid my senior year tuition without ever leaving her name. Principal Rivers was the only one who believed I could go back to school after I got expelled. My mother was sick and Eleanor was the one sending hospital money every month, under the name A Caring Friend. I sat in the front row, hands clenched around my necklace, tears streaming down. I had lost everything. My family, even if it was just one person, was now gone too. When the funeral ended, I returned to the little house with the white picket fence, where I'd lived for the past decade. Everything was just the same. The blanket still neatly folded, the books still on the shelf. The teacup she always used still had a lipstick stain on its rim. But she wasn't there. That night, I sat alone in the living room, no lights on, no TV. I just sat there, quietly, my fingers tracing the silver key pendant on my chest. And then I whispered, "Grandma, I'm not ready." No reply, only silence, thick and absolute, swallowing every echo like the night itself. But in that exact moment, somewhere deep within, I heard what she had always taught me. You don't need to be ready to begin. You only need enough courage not to step back. Grandma Eleanor's funeral was held on a cloudy Saturday morning, just like she once said. A life should be honored under a calm sky without fuss. St. Clair's church was small but filled to the brim, former students, colleagues, neighbors, even strangers who had once been quietly helped by her. I sat in the front pew wearing a simple black dress and the necklace she gave me on my 18th birthday. My hands gripped the eulogy, printed on recycled paper, something she always encouraged to protect the environment. As the pastor's voice faded, people rose one by one to offer their condolences. I hadn't even stood yet when the atmosphere shifted, as though someone had opened a door and let cold wind flood straight into my chest. I turned around, and I saw them. My parents. I didn't recognize them at first. 10 years is enough for once familiar faces to become strangers. My mother, Stephanie, now had crow's feet around her eyes, her brown hair highlighted with pale blonde, and wore a black dress that seemed more chosen for social impression than grief. My father, Travis, entered looking composed but stiff. He wore a suit and black tie, but his eyes, those eyes I remembered too well, not an ounce of remorse. I stood still. They walked toward me, like stepping out of a warped old dream. My mother reached out, her voice feather light. "Olivia, you've grown so much." I stepped back. Not out of shock, but because I felt something was wrong. There was something cold, vacant and hollow in the way they looked at me. Not the eyes of parents who had searched for their daughter for 10 long years. "We're very sorry about Eleanor," my father added, trying to inject emotion into his tone. "We came as soon as we heard." I didn't respond. I just stared at them like they were strangers intruding on a sacred moment not meant for them. And then what I had feared, and expected, came. Even quicker than I thought. "You'll be coming home with us, won't you?" my mother asked, her voice no longer soft but switching into that familiar tone. Commanding, with a hint of annoyance. "You're still under 18, aren't you?" my father added. "We're still your legal guardians." I stood motionless. It felt like someone had thrown a rock into my chest, and the icy ripples kept crashing inside me. Not one word about how I'd lived the past 10 years. Not a single pause for apology or uncertainty. They got straight to the point, as if I were just a document, or an asset, to be swiftly dealt with. "I'm not going anywhere," I said, my voice hoarse. My mother frowned. "Olivia, don't be childish. You're our daughter. Family is where you belong." I laughed. A dry, hollow laugh, even I didn't recognize it coming from myself. "Family," I echoed. For 10 years I waited at the window every afternoon. 10 years. And now you show up. Not for me, but for what she left behind. "Don't speak like that, Olivia," my father said, his tone tightening with frustration. "We both know she left behind assets. She was my mother. I have a right." I didn't move. I simply reached into my pocket and pulled out the envelope Grandma's lawyer, Mr. James Whitmore, had handed me just before the ceremony. "I think you should wait until the will is read. For now, I suggest you both step back. This is not a stage for your performance." My mother's face went pale, though she tried to maintain a polite smile. "You're misunderstanding. We just want to be here for you." I looked her straight in the eyes. "If that were true, you would have come sooner, not waited until she passed and rumors about money started to spread." I turned away, offering no more words. As I walked forward, my heart no longer trembled like before. The grief of losing Grandma was still there, dull and heavy. But it wasn't alone anymore. It was joined by anger, by clarity, and by a resolve not to let the people who once abandoned me lay a hand on anything that belonged to Eleanor. Not her money, not her legacy, and especially not me. The funeral ended in silence. I didn't look back. But I knew, this time, I was the one leaving them behind. Right after the ceremony, I was invited into a small room behind the church used for private parish meetings. The air inside was heavy, as if the gray wooden walls had absorbed too many bitter truths over the years. My parents were already there, seated on either side of a long wooden table, their eyes darting between the door and the neatly stacked documents across from them. They looked at me as if I were the outsider. But the truth was, they were the ghosts now, trying to force their way into a chapter that no longer belonged to them. Grandma's attorney, Mr. James Whitmore, stood by the window, adjusting his glasses. A tall man in his early 50s, calm in demeanor but with eyes sharp as blades. He nodded when he saw me, then motioned for me to sit beside him. "Thank you all for being here," he said, voice deep and steady but firm. "We will now begin the reading of Eleanor Rivers' last will and testament." "My father." Travis arched an eyebrow and leaned back in his chair as if bracing to receive a hefty inheritance. "My mother." Stephanie tightened her grip on her purse, eyes locked on the briefcase in front of Mr. Whitmore. He placed his hand on the file and opened to the first page. The will was written 5 years ago and was last updated and notarized 8 months ago. Before I read the main provisions, I need to confirm one important detail. He turned to me. "Olivia, are you wearing the necklace your grandmother gave you?" I was slightly surprised but then reached up, pulled the silver chain from beneath my shirt and let the pendant swing in the air. He nodded. "Good, then we can proceed." My parents exchanged confused glances. My father spoke first. "Excuse me, what does that key have to do with the distribution of assets?" "I'll explain," James replied, his voice cool and controlled. He carefully flipped to the second page, then began to read. His voice filled the room, clear and resolute. "I, Eleanor Rivers, being of sound mind and of my own free will, declare that all my assets, including real estate, bank accounts, investment portfolios, and full ownership of the Rivers Educational Foundation, shall be transferred in entirety to my only granddaughter, Olivia Rivers." No one spoke for a few seconds. Then suddenly, "What?" my mother shrieked, springing up from her chair. "That's impossible. We're her biological children." My father slammed his hand on the table. "There must be some mistake. A minor can't possibly manage an estate of that size." James remained unmoved. He pulled out another folder from his briefcase, placed it gently on the table, and slid it toward them. "This is a certified copy of the legal guardianship termination signed by both of you 10 years ago, along with the court approval transferring full custody of Olivia to Mrs. Eleanor." I saw my mother's face drain of color. She snatched the papers, flipping through them with shaking hands. Her face looked bloodless. My father froze, then let out a bitter laugh. "She forced us to sign that. She must have manipulated the courts so she could keep Olivia to herself." James shook his head. "No, all documentation is legitimate with witnesses and approved by a South Carolina judge. There is no indication of coercion or legal misconduct." "And what if we sue?" my mother hissed, eyes red, not with sorrow but with rage. James replied instantly, without hesitation. "You're welcome to try, but I'm afraid Mrs. Eleanor prepared every detail with utmost care. All assets have already been transferred into a trust in Olivia's name before her death. You will not be able to touch a cent." I looked over at my parents. But there was no remorse in their eyes. Only disappointment that they had failed to claim the prize. I clenched the necklace in my hand, then spoke. For the first time since entering the room. "You left me when I was 8. No phone call, no explanation. She raised me, she believed in me, and now? You only show up when there's a cent of money?" "Olivia, you're being manipulated," my mother interrupted. "She filled your head with things that aren't true." I stood up. "No one filled my head with anything. What I know came from 10 years of your silence." Then I turned to James. "I want to proceed as she wished." He nodded, his eyes softening. "She also left you a private letter. But that's for later. For now, the legal matter is resolved. I believe this meeting should conclude." No one objected. My parents rose, gathering their things in silence. As they walked out of the room, my mother tossed one last line over her shoulder. "You'll regret turning your back on your family." "Your eyes," I replied softly, without looking back. I'm not turning my back on family. I'm walking away from the ones who did it first. The door closed, and for the first time in days of grief, I no longer felt like a lost child. I was Olivia Rivers, and I was ready for everything ahead. I thought the reading of the will would be the end of it. I had hoped they would understand, accept, and return to the selfish world they had chosen 10 years ago. But I had underestimated greed, the one thing that had never run dry in their hearts. Just 3 days later, I received a notice from James's law office. My parents had filed a petition with the court to invalidate the will, citing concerns that Eleanor may have been psychologically manipulated prior to her death. I let out a bitter laugh as I listened to James read those lines over the phone. They think they can trample both truth and law just because they don't like the outcome, I said. James's voice lowered. You don't need to worry. We have all the evidence. But they won't stop anytime soon. And he was right. On a local news site, I saw a sensational headline. 18-year-old girl accused of manipulating grandmother's estate. Below it was a photo of me stepping out of the church, eyes swollen from crying, lips pressed tight. My mother, Stephanie, appeared in the article with the caption, "We just want our daughter to have a real family. We lost our parental rights because of the manipulations of her grandmother." I read every word, rage surging through me like wildfire in my veins. Not only lies, they had made themselves the victims. I called James immediately. I want to speak out, publicly, clearly. I've been silent for too long. And so I did. At a press conference held at the Rivers Educational Foundation, where I had just been appointed honorary chair, I stood before dozens of reporters, cameras, and a storm of flashing lights. I wore a charcoal blazer, and the key pendant around my neck glinted in the spotlight. I didn't read from a script. I spoke from my heart. My name is Olivia Rivers. I am the only granddaughter of Eleanor Rivers, the woman who raised me since I was 8 years old, when my biological parents left me at her doorstep, without a single explanation. The room was silent. I continued. For 10 years, I didn't receive a single call, message, or letter from them. I grew up in love, discipline, and trust, given to me by my grandmother. And when she passed, they showed up. Not to share in the grief, but to claim what they never contributed to: money, honor, and power. I paused, then looked straight into the camera. I am no longer the child they left behind. Now, I am the one who revokes their right to call me family. That afternoon, as I was about to leave the office, the front desk called. Ms. Rivers. There are 2 people demanding to see you. They say they're your parents. I went to the lobby. And there they stood. Stephanie and Travis. Gone was the usual confidence. My mother was heavily made up, but her lips were tight with tension. My father wore a wrinkled dress shirt, clutching a stack of disorganized papers. Probably rejected appeals. "Olivia," my mother began, her voice softer than usual. "We need to talk." I folded my arms, standing tall, without inviting them in. "You have nothing to say to me." My father cut in. "This is family, sweetheart. We shouldn't be tearing each other apart like this." I laughed, a sharp, cold sound unlike any I had made before. "Family? You cut me out of your lives for 10 years, and now you're using the media to smear me. That's what you call family?" "We were wrong," my mother said, her voice beginning to crack. "But who doesn't make mistakes?" I stepped closer, looking her straight in the eye. "The difference is, some people make mistakes and fix them, others make mistakes and just get worse." My father clenched his fists. "We gave you life, no one can replace that." I pulled the silver key from around my neck and held it at eye level. "Grandma Eleanor didn't replace anyone. She chose me. Every day, every moment. You chose to leave, and now, I choose to leave you." My mother whispered, almost pleading. "You'll regret turning your back on blood." I took a deep breath. "No. You'll regret ever thinking I'd stay silent." I turned and walked away, without looking back. This time, it wasn't them walking away like 10 years ago. This time, I was the one leaving, with my head held high, and not a trace of regret in my heart. 1 week after the press conference, I returned to Eleanor's home, where everything remained as it had been when she was alive. The wall clock still ran 3 minutes fast. The lavender by the window had clearly been watered every afternoon, and the cream-colored porcelain tea set still sat on the table, as if she had just stepped out to pick fresh mint from the garden. In her study, attorney James Whitmore inserted a small silver USB drive into his laptop. The screen lit up with the words, "Only open when Olivia is ready." I swallowed hard. My hands were cold, but I nodded. James clicked play. The screen brightened, and there she was. Eleanor, clearer than any memory I had ever clung to. She wore a striped blouse, her silver hair neatly pinned back, her eyes bright but deep, as though she were looking through time itself. Straight into my heart. "Olivia, if you're watching this video, then things have unfolded exactly as I predicted," she began, her voice calm but full of emotion. "I'm sorry I couldn't say this to you while I was alive, but some things are meant to be said at the right moment." I sat up straight, fingers tightening around the key pendant, waves stirring deep inside me. "You've always wondered about that key, haven't you?" She smiled gently. "It doesn't open a safe. It doesn't unlock a secret room. It opens another kind of door. A door I've spent my life preparing for you to walk through." The video shifted to clips. Children at a care center, pale but with bright eyes. Then footage of a row of small offices in an old industrial area. The faded sign reading, "Rivers Foundation for Abandoned Children." Her voice continued. "For many years, I've quietly built the Rivers Foundation, using profits from my investments and company to support shelters, foster centers, and scholarships for abandoned children across the state. No one knew who was behind it. And now, I want you to take it over." I was stunned. The screen returned to her face, serious but filled with pride. "I didn't just leave you money, Olivia, I left you a legacy, a responsibility, an opportunity to change lives, the way yours was once changed." I bowed my head, my chest ached, not from pressure, but from a sudden, overwhelming understanding. For the first time, I realized why she had raised me the way she did. Every lesson, every moment of patience, every whispered reminder in the night. Not to make me smart, but to make me strong enough to carry this. 1 month later, I officially assumed the role of Chief Executive Officer of the Rivers Foundation, according to the terms of the will. At first, many members of the board were skeptical. I was an 18-year-old girl with no college degree and no executive experience. But I walked into that first meeting wearing the lavender blazer my grandmother had once worn when presenting to the State Education Board back in 1998. I had found it in her old closet. And when I spoke, I didn't read from a script. I spoke from memory, from gratitude, from a deep understanding of every child who had ever been forgotten. I spoke about myself. About the little girl who used to sit waiting by the window. About the ache in her chest when no one came back. About the one woman who chose to love me unconditionally. And about the mission I carry now, to make sure no child ever has to wait the way I once did. When I finished, the room fell silent. Then the first person to clap was Mrs. Helen, the financial advisor who had worked with Eleanor for over 2 decades. Her eyes welled up. "I see Eleanor in you. And I know we're putting this mission in the right hands." I didn't upgrade my car. Grandma's old Ford still sat in the garage. I'd just changed the oil regularly and kept the cinnamon essential oil she always used. I didn't move into a mansion. I stayed in the little house with the white fence. The place where dreams had first begun to bloom. I didn't hire bodyguards. I drove myself to the centers, walked with the children to the park, told bedtime stories before they fell asleep. I used my own money to open 3 additional branches of the foundation, in Charleston, Columbia, and a small town near the Georgia border, where statistics showed the highest rate of child abandonment in the state. Each time I signed off on a scholarship or an expansion plan, I remembered her words. "True wealth isn't about how much you own, it's about what you choose to create. One afternoon, as I left the new branch office, an 8-year-old boy tugged at my hand. "Miss Olivia, are you the one who built this place?" I knelt to his level and smiled. "No, sweetheart, a wonderful grandmother built it. I'm just the one keeping her flame alive." He nodded thoughtfully, then whispered, "I wish I had a grandma like yours." I gently squeezed his shoulder. "You do now. And from this moment on, you won't be left behind again." Around my neck, the silver key still hung quietly, not a mystery anymore, but a reminder. I'm not just an heir to a fortune, I'm the keeper of a mission. And I am Olivia Rivers, the girl who was once abandoned, now a place where others can begin again. Olivia's story is not just a journey from pain to healing, it's a powerful testament to the strength of unconditional love and quiet resilience. From an abandoned child, Olivia rose not only to defend her own dignity, but to inherit and expand the noble mission her grandmother left behind. She chose not revenge, but to build a future rooted in compassion and tangible action. The greatest lesson? Sometimes, real family isn't defined by blood, but by those who choose to stay when everyone else has walked away. What do you think about Olivia's decision? Do you believe she should forgive her parents? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt, powerful stories about family and life. I received the invitation on a Wednesday afternoon, a thick, heavy envelope embossed with gold patterns on a navy blue background. It looked more like an invitation to a royal wedding than a family reunion. But what stunned me wasn't its flashy appearance. It was the name printed on the sender line, the Worthington family. You're invited to the annual reunion at Sapphire Hills Resort, Colorado. A laugh slipped from my throat, not from joy, but from bitterness. I, Savannah Worthington, the daughter cast aside for daring to live differently, for choosing struggle before success, had just received an invitation to an event they once swore I'd never be welcome at. I placed the card down on the granite countertop of my small Seattle apartment, staring at it like it was a glittering mask. Shiny, polished, but hollow inside. Not even 2 minutes later my phone buzzed. It was Callie, my cousin and once best friend, back when we used to ride bikes around Fairview Park as kids. She hadn't called in years. But now she did. Right when the invite landed. "Savannah?" Callie's voice came through the speaker, so sugary sweet it immediately put me on guard. "You got the invite, didn't you?" I nodded slightly, even though she couldn't see me. "Yeah, it looks grand. Right? This year's extra special. Sapphire Hills is the most luxurious resort in the Rockies. They've got a Michelin-starred chef and a world-class spa. The family's really pulling out all the stops." I said nothing. I waited for what I knew was coming. And it did. Callie hesitated, her tone softening. "But I think you get it, Savannah. Not everyone really fits that kind of space. I mean, people like you, running those little hostels in the city. You might feel out of place." "People like me?" I asked, my voice low but sharp. "That's not what I meant," she rushed. "It's just, there'll be a lot of special guests this time. State senators, a few Silicon Valley CEOs, and, well, you know, our family cares a lot about image." Silence. Inside, I felt a mix of anger, contempt, and a little sadness. But no more pain. I looked around my apartment. Not lavish but warm. On my desk sat blueprints for the next phase of Urban Leaf Hostels, the sustainable lodging chain I'd built from scratch over the past 7 years. A network now praised by backpackers and students across the West Coast. But to the Worthingtons, I was still just the odd one who dropped out of an MBA to become a receptionist at some backpacker inn. "Who picked Sapphire Hills anyway?" I asked, though I already knew. "Madison, of course," Callie replied proudly. She said it took her 3 months to get the resort director to confirm the booking. "Everyone's impressed with her planning and vision." I smirked. Oh, the irony. I, the one who secured the contract to supply all furniture and digital service systems to Sapphire Hills, was now being subtly excluded from the very place I helped shape. All because I didn't wear the labels they deemed worthy. Savannah, I hope you're not too upset. Maybe next time if things work out, who knows? Callie said, trying to end the call gently. Yeah, who knows, I replied. Maybe next year, things will be very different. I hung up without waiting for goodbye. Outside my window, light rain began to fall over the rooftops of Fremont, the neighborhood I chose not because I was poor, but because I loved the freedom it offered. I poured myself a cup of hot ginger tea and placed it next to my laptop. Beside it sat an unsent email, a service renewal contract between Everline Design Studio, one of my investments, and Sapphire Hills Resort. I smiled, cold and steady. They thought I wasn't high class enough? Fine. They were about to see exactly what real class looked like. When it wasn't handed down through golf course mansions or engraved business cards, but built from every insult turned into leverage. I still remembered that first night home from graduation. While my friends buzzed with internship plans at Fortune 500 companies, I quietly packed my things and left the University of Oregon with a degree in hospitality management that my father once called a lifelong poverty certificate. The whole family had gathered in my grandparents' Denver estate, a stately old mansion every Worthington silently viewed as a badge of honor. My father, Richard Worthington, sat at the center like a self-crowned king. My mother, Eloise, poured tea with the air of an aristocratic matriarch trapped in a dull stage play. "You're going to join Everland Group, right?" my father asked, his voice booming like a command dressed up as a question. Everland Group, his real estate investment firm, where every child and grandchild was expected to join to be seen as a valuable member. I looked up, met his gaze, and said plainly, "I turned it down. I want to start in hospitality. I've applied to a hostel chain in Portland." The room froze for a second. "What?" His voice ricocheted off the walls. "You're going to clean up after tourists instead of managing a $300 million property portfolio?" I didn't respond. There was no answer that would satisfy him anyway. My mother sighed, her eyes cutting through me, not with disappointment, but embarrassment. "Savannah, you're a Worthington. No one with our name wears a name tag behind a front desk." I stood up, my heart pounding but my voice steady. "Good, because I plan to wear one. I'll wear it until I know every brick and paycheck of this industry. And then, I'll build something none of you ever dared to dream of." I left that house carrying not shame, but a fire that never went out. They didn't want me to have dreams. They wanted a quiet replica of themselves, someone who smiled on cue at dinner parties. My first year in Portland was a long stretch of sweat and tears. I worked night shifts as a front desk clerk at a tiny hotel near the Pearl District. By day, I took courses in lodging design and guest behavior analysis. At night, I dealt with drunk guests, broken A/Cs, and the graveyard shifts no one wanted. Once, I was asked to clean an entire third-floor hallway after someone spilled red wine from the elevator to their room. A coworker looked at me, shrugged, and said, "Not your job, Savannah. Your front desk." I just smiled and grabbed the mop, because every drop I wiped up was a lesson in hotel operations no textbook could teach. By my second winter, I was night manager at a rundown place called Riverview Lodge. The owner, Marty, a black man in his 50s and a former regional manager for Marriott, was the first person to tell me, "You've got vision, but to build it, you gotta wade through the mud. I won't teach you from books, I'll let you fall, and then you'll get back up." And fall I did, many times. I was once threatened by a guest with calling the police because I refused to upgrade their room for free. I once witnessed a junior employee stealing cash and had to report it to the police. I once had to use my personal credit card to pay for a batch of linens when the supplier delivered the wrong order, just to avoid disrupting the guest experience during the holiday season. And every time something like that happened, it only made me more certain. If I wanted to change the hospitality industry, I had to start from the bottom. 3 years later, I opened my first hotel, a renovated old 3-story house in the Fremont neighborhood of Seattle. I named it the Pine's Nest. A nest among the pine trees. No luxury signs. No $1,000 cocktail bar. But every pillow there, every breakfast I personally made, carried one promise. Here, everyone is treated with respect. The first reviews came slowly, but then they spread. Young travelers, professors, backpacking couples. They didn't need red carpets. They needed to feel heard. I opened a second branch in Capitol Hill, then a third, in Tacoma. Then I teamed up with 2 old friends to found Urban Leaf Hospitality, a booking platform that connects guests with authentic local experiences. But throughout those years, my family never once asked how I was doing. To them, I was still just the girl working at a 3-star motel, and they kept sending invites to weddings, funerals, or family gatherings, without even putting my name on them. But honestly, I didn't need them to remember me. I just needed them to witness it. And this time, I had prepared a stage. Not to be applauded, but so they'd have to bow. Not to me, but to the choice they once called a mistake. I had slept in the damp basement of my own hotel. A rundown building in Spokane that most real estate agents didn't even want to mention. But it was there, in room 3, with a leaky toilet and flickering hallway lights, that everything began. It was called the Orchard Inn. Sounds poetic, but it had once been a roadside lodge abandoned for nearly 5 years. I bought it for $82,000. Every penny I had, plus an unsecured loan I signed under the risk of losing everything if I failed. Everyone around me thought I was crazy, and honestly, sometimes I did too. But I knew if I didn't start there, I would never start at all. I didn't hire an architect. Had no marketing team. I learned logo design on YouTube, wrote the website copy myself, and painted every wall with a discounted brush. By day, I drove around the city sourcing used furniture. By night, I assembled each nightstand, screwed in every coat hook by hand. Instead of running Facebook ads like everyone else, I handwrote letters to local travel bloggers, offering them a free night and a homemade breakfast if they'd share their experience. 3 accepted. One of them, Claire, a woman in her 40s with a blog focused on small lodgings, wrote a piece I still keep today. A place with a real heart. Simple. Rustic. But every detail makes you feel like you've come home. 3 months later, the Orchard Inn was fully booked every weekend. Guests returned, bringing friends. I used the saved profits to slowly renovate the rooms. Starting with the first floor, then gradually working up to the second. I didn't open another hotel right away. Instead, I turned that very place into a concept lab. Testing self-check-in tablets, using recycled materials for decor, creating a minimal touch maximum connection experience for Gen Z and millennial guests. After 2 years, I raised my first round of funding, just $300,000 from 3 angel investors who had once stayed at the Orchard Inn. With that, I purchased a lakeside lodge in Idaho, named it Fern Shore, and launched my second branch. And so, step by step, not flashy, not loud, but steady, I expanded. Washington, Oregon, Colorado. When I reached my 10th hotel, I officially founded SVA Hospitality. Named after the very name they once mocked, Savannah Victoria Aldridge. Only then did I begin hiring a professional marketing team, recruiting a CFO, and building a centralized quality management system. I didn't chase outdated luxury standards. I created a new one. Luxury through intention. Where luxury didn't come from crystal chandeliers or $500 wine glasses, but from sincerity, refinement, and quiet efficiency. When I opened my 17th hotel, the Juniper Vale in Aspen, Modern Retreats magazine called me the woman redefining luxury for the next generation. As for me, I still personally inspect the bedsheets and walk barefoot through every new room to feel the floor's cleanliness. I remember clearly an investor meeting in Manhattan where a venture fund director asked me, "Why not go the traditional hotel chain route? Less investment, faster profits, easier to sell. I looked him in the eye. Because I don't build to sell, I build to outlast the Forbes list you're chasing. Last year I turned 33. By that point, SVA Hospitality owned 21 resorts across 4 countries: the United States, Canada, New Zealand, and Sweden. Each location had its own character, but upheld the same values: warmth, simplicity, elegance, and sustainability. The crown jewel among them is Azure Summit, a resort perched on a hilltop overlooking Half Moon Bay, California. It's my personal reminder. Every brick here was paid for with the insults I once swallowed. And when Sapphire Hills, where my family is now hosting their reunion, needed a partner to overhaul its operations system, they didn't know the company that won the bid was SVA Tech, my subsidiary. When Callie bragged that Madison had to call the executive director just to secure a reservation, I laughed. Not from humor but from irony. She had no idea that the executive director personally approved her request, with a 35% rate markup, plus an added fee for premium personalization services, which I approved myself. Yes, I was once seen as a burden, the leftover shadow of the Worthington family. But now, they're hosting their event on the red carpet I laid. And they have no idea that Savannah they once cast out has turned her name into a brand that's making the entire hospitality industry take notice. 3 days after Callie's oh-so-subtle phone call, I received an email from Sapphire Hills VIP booking department. It looked ordinary enough: confirmation of a group reservation under the Worthington Family Reunion. Approved at a special rate with custom requests. I smiled, not because the event was happening there, but because I was the one who approved it. With the name S.V. Aldridge signed on the executive authorization line, my real name discreetly hidden beneath the complex web of SVA Hospitality's leadership. And of course the organizer, specifically Madison Worthington, my cousin, chairwoman of Family Tradition Coordination as she calls herself, was completely unaware. I still remember our conversation 8 years ago. Back when I was struggling to keep the second branch in Idaho afloat, she once messaged me on Facebook Messenger. "You should consider coming back to work for the family. Better than chasing after cheap motels." I never responded. And now, Madison had just posted a photo on social media, standing in front of the Sapphire Hills emblem with a caption: "A perfect choice for a perfect family. Thanks to the Sapphire Hills team for helping us uphold the Worthington standard." I saved the photo, not as a keepsake, but as a reminder of their delusion, before the truth comes to light. At the resort's command center, I called an internal meeting with all managers and department heads. I wanted control over every detail, from the lobby lighting to the signature hallway fragrance. "We cannot afford a single mistake during Worthington Week," I said, voice calm but firm. "They're my family. And they have no idea." All eyes turned to me, a flicker of surprise, then resolved. Marcus, my closest assistant, who's been with me since the first hotel in Seattle, nodded. "They don't know you're the owner?" "No. To them I'm still just Savannah, the cousin who dropped out of her MBA to clean hotel rooms." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "And now they're throwing a party on the stone flooring you selected, dining in the very room you designed?" I smiled, not hiding the bitterness in my tone. "Exactly. They'll walk into the world I created, believing it reflects their taste. They'll praise each other, pat themselves on the back, never realizing that every napkin, every glass of wine they raise, was planned by me, down to the smallest detail. I don't need revenge in the old-fashioned way. I don't need to shout that I've succeeded. I just need them to fall right into the trap of pride they built for themselves." On the day of the reunion, I didn't appear in the main lobby. Instead, I stood in the control room, behind the surveillance screens, watching their every move. My father's charcoal gray Bentley pulled up to the main entrance at 5:45 p.m. He stepped out from the back seat wearing a custom-tailored black suit, his face still carrying the same cold sternness that once made me lower my head as a child. Madison arrived afterward, wearing a red Carolina Herrera dress, holding a Chanel bag, her oversized sunglasses covering most of her face. She walked past the rows of hydrangeas I had specifically requested for the entrance, strutting like she owned the place. And then, like a perfectly timed scene in a play, she said loudly, "Good thing I called the executive director directly to secure this booking. Everyone wants Sapphire Hills in peak season. You know, not everyone has the kind of high-level connections I do." I heard every word through the surveillance speaker. A front desk staff member bowed and responded, "We're honored to host the Worthington family. All customization requests were approved by Mrs." She glanced down at the memo. "MSSV. Aldridge, our strategic director and current owner." Madison laughed, oblivious to the name. "Sounds fancy. That's how you know they're on top of things. People like that." She walked away, unaware that she was stepping across a hallway embedded with the initials SVV etched into the floor tiles. I looked at Marcus. He was smirking. "When are you planning to show up?" I lifted the glass of untouched Chardonnay, speaking softly. "When they think the evening is perfect. When their pride reaches its peak. That's when the curtain rises." Marcus nodded. He didn't ask anything else. I walked toward the elevator that led to the rooftop, where the LED setup was scheduled to light up at exactly 7:10 p.m. The large screen hanging in the central hall wouldn't display just the Sapphire Hills logo that night. It would change. And in that moment, every proud face raising a glass would freeze. Because I, Savannah Worthington, would be the one hosting the evening, and I wouldn't be appearing as an uninvited guest, but as the one throwing the entire event. I don't need to shout. I don't need to strike back with cruel words or cutting glares. For the Worthingtons, people who've only ever known how to bask in applause, the strongest blow is silence. The moment when an entire room goes still, realizing they're standing on a stage, written and directed by me. I started planning 3 weeks before the reunion. Every detail, from how the lights would softly graze the archways to the floral colors on the reception tables, was personally approved by me. No intermediaries, no delegation. Direct control. I chose the lobby's signature scent to be fig and white amber, the one my mother once mocked as cheap like a low-end massage parlor. Yet it's the signature fragrance throughout my luxury hotel chain, beloved enough to be listed by Condé Nast Traveler in the top 10 signature scents in hospitality. That same scent would waft through Sapphire Hills that evening like a quiet laugh. They wouldn't recognize it consciously, but their subconscious would. And it would stir something oddly familiar, faintly uncomfortable. Like the memory of having looked down on someone, only to be pulled back into that reality. The menu? I entrusted that to Chef Anton, the Austrian chef I worked with in Zurich. The appetizer was a purple lemon tart, the same kind my grandmother once told me to learn to make so I'd at least have value in the kitchen. Now it was elevated with French butter and organic lavender essence, served on custom-blown Venetian glass plates. And then came the name cards. That's where I placed the knife. I had the design team print each Worthington family member's name on clear acrylic cards, but with no titles. No doctor, no CEO, no VP, or any of the honorifics they once wore like armor. Just first and last names, plain, unadorned. I wanted to see how they'd react when treated like ordinary people in a space they believed was their stage. Marcus asked me, "Are you sure no one's going to figure it out? Won't they recognize the signature SVA design?" I smiled. If they were ever going to notice, they would have already. But they're too busy looking at themselves to ever notice someone else. Especially someone they once called worthless. I even prepared a short film, a montage of the journey of SVA hospitality, from Orchard Inn to Azure Summit. Shot by drone, produced using high-end cinematography techniques, and set to orchestral music performed by a Viennese chamber symphony. The video would play at exactly 7:10 p.m., right after Madison's speech. The one where she fully believed she was the family's face for the evening. And, as the Sapphire Hills logo faded into SVA Hospitality, founded and owned by Savannah Victoria Aldridge. everything would come to a halt. I had even planned the retreat. Immediately after the video, the staff would move discreetly to the left wing, leaving the main hall clear as I stepped out through the west door, where the skylight would cast its glow directly onto the large sign behind me. Welcome home, Savannah. No glitter, no arrogance, just one sentence. Enough to drown out all the arrogance they threw at me over the past 15 years. I told Marcus, I don't want them to feel humiliated, I just want them to feel my presence, the choice they called a mistake and the worth they tried to deny. Marcus nodded, his eyes flickering with something between admiration and understanding. So we're not throwing a reunion for them, but a farewell to how they used to treat you? I turned away, speaking gently. No, Marcus. I'm not saying goodbye to anyone. I'm just opening the door. Whether they walk through it, that's up to them. I don't need an apology. I don't need recognition. I've long stepped out of their shadow. But tonight, they will step into the light I built. And even if they don't recognize me at first, they won't be able to look away by the end. The clock struck 7:10 p.m. Just as I had planned. The lights in the Sapphire Hills Grand Hall dimmed, the background music stopped, and the massive LED screen behind the stage began to shift. Madison, with the microphone still in her hand, mid-sentence about the Worthington family's refined taste and the connections that secured this prestigious venue, suddenly froze. The air turned still. Every eye moved from her to the screen. The Sapphire Hills logo appeared first. Elegant, classic, silver against a deep navy backdrop. Then it shifted to a large, stark white line of text that sliced through the darkness like a blade. SBA Hospitality Group, founded and led by Savannah Victoria Aldridge. A heavy silence settled, stretching out as if the universe itself had stopped to hold its breath. The sound of a wineglass shattering on marble echoed across the room. Someone whispered, "No way." I stepped out from the west door, past the candlelit banquet tables. I wore a custom-tailored ash-gray suit, my hair pinned up neatly, heels clicking sharply against the floor. Each step striking like a hammer on the dusty past they had buried me in. Madison stared at me, eyes wide, mascara threatening to run. "Savannah!" she gasped, unable to believe the figure walking toward her. What are you doing here?" I stopped in the center of the hall, surrounded by stunned, angry, and shocked stares. I saw them. Each person who had once labeled me the ungrateful one, the family embarrassment, now seated on silk-covered chairs, in a room I had designed, eating food I had selected, and breathing in a scent they once called cheap. I spoke, quietly, but each word sliced through their illusions like a blade. "Good evening. I'm Savannah Victoria Aldridge, Chief Executive Officer and founder of SBA Hospitality, and the sole owner of Sapphire Hills Resort." Silence, as if the air had been vacuumed out of the room. Madison stammered. No way. "Would you like to see the ownership documents?" I asked, pulling a copy of the contract from my jacket pocket. "Or maybe just check the name on the executive office? On the 12th floor. My father stood. He was the only one not looking at me with hostility, but with eyes heavy with memory. As if, finally, he recognized that the daughter he once called a disappointment had become a woman he no longer had the right to command. You're the one behind all of this?" "I am," I said, meeting his gaze. "When you said you would never allow a Worthington to work in hospitality, I began learning how to own hotels instead of applying for jobs in them." Aunts, uncles, cousins around the room began whispering. A few pulled out their phones, searching the company name. Others just stared at one another, confused, red-faced. No one daring to speak. I turned to Madison, the one who had once intentionally seated me with the catering staff at her wedding, calling it Savannah's usual spot. "You said it took a powerful connection to secure this venue, didn't you?" Madison didn't reply, her face had gone pale. "Well?" "That connection was me." I gave a half smile. "And the 35% VIP service surcharge? You just paid that to me." From the back of the room, Marcus stepped forward. He handed each of them a navy envelope sealed with silver wax. Inside, a detailed invoice for the event, not cheap, and a brochure outlining the growth journey of SVA Hospitality. Madison opened her envelope, her eyes scanning the number. A choked sound escaped her lips. You charge this much? We're family." I lifted my head. My expression wasn't angry, it was cold. "Family? When was the last time you actually called me that? Or do you only remember I exist when you need someone to polish the backdrop of your public image?" I turned to my father. He looked at me for a long time. "I was wrong," he said. Not loudly, but his voice did not tremble. "About everything." I didn't respond immediately. In my mind flashed all the nights I spent in tiny rooms, scrubbing toilets, writing financial plans under the soft yellow glow of a desk lamp. Working, thinking. One day. They'll see. And today was that day. I looked at him, calm but firm. "You didn't believe in me, and that was the best thing you ever did. Because if you had, I wouldn't have needed to prove anything. And SVA wouldn't exist." The entire hall was still. Only the sound of tense breathing, the clink of utensils, and every pair of eyes fixed on me. I took a small step back, lifted my hand, like a host welcoming honored guests. "Welcome to Sapphire Hills. Welcome to the world the daughter cast out by her own family. Built from the ashes you left behind." I paused for a moment after that last sentence. My eyes swept across the room. Every stunned face, every fidget in their chairs, every discomforted glance, as if they had wandered into a celebration where they were no longer the stars. I didn't need to scream. I didn't need to cry. Their silence was the reward. I raised my hand. Marcus understood instantly and tapped the tablet screen. The massive LED display behind me faded to black, then lit up with the SVA Hospitality logo against a sky full of stars. One by one the images appeared, not with flashy effects, but through cinematic, seamless visuals. A snowy resort in Norway where golden light glowed from cozy wooden cabins. A floating hotel on turquoise waters in New Zealand where guests enjoyed breakfast overlooking the ocean. A hillside retreat in Kyoto, built entirely from recycled materials and certified carbon neutral. Beneath each frame was a small caption. Owned and operated by Savannah Victoria Aldridge. Then came the headquarters of SVA in San Francisco, an 18-story glass tower with a brilliant silver logo on its rooftop. The entire hall fell into stunned silence. From the left side, a murmur rose. Someone didn't whisper low enough. "She's the CEO of all that?" I turned around, my voice steady and clear. "Yes, I don't work at a hotel. I own a hotel system." While everyone here was clinging to their fake prestige, I was laying the foundation for a global empire, without anyone in this room, without asking for a single dollar, without needing any of the high-level connections you all take so much pride in. Madison bowed her head. My mother, Eloise, sat frozen, her hand clenched tightly around her wineglass as if trying to crush it. I continued. I was mocked by this family for working at a front desk, ridiculed for chasing idealistic dreams, deleted from family photos, removed from group chats for not being successful enough to contribute to the conversation. I looked directly at my father, Richard Worthington, the man who once told me, "Savannah, if you don't study investment, don't expect a place in this family. You once said I had no future. And now, you're sitting in a resort I own, drinking from glassware designed by my company, and eating from a menu I personally approved." He swallowed hard, his face tightening, but said nothing in return. I walked to the reception desk, where Marcus had prepared a small wooden box. I opened it and handed out envelopes to each family member. On the front, printed clearly, "Special invoice, Worthington family discount." I wasn't joking. I had actually included a 30% surcharge for personalized service and brand image maintenance. You think booking Sapphire Hills was about connections? No, it was about money. A lot of money. And you just paid it to me. Some people laughed, not out of amusement but because their discomfort had surpassed the threshold of tolerance. Camille, my cousin, the only one who ever secretly wrote to ask if I was okay during the years the family turned its back, sat near the corner table. Suddenly burst out laughing. "This needs to be a movie," she said, trying to hold it in but failing. "The royal family gets billed by Cinderella for their night of fake glory." I looked at her and smiled softly. Not because she was right, but because she dared to say what was right, in front of those who never knew how to listen. I returned to the center of the hall, glancing around once more. I didn't do this for revenge. I don't need approval from anyone in this room. But I want the truth placed where it belongs. I used to be the overlooked girl mopping floors, but today, I'm the only one here who doesn't need to pretend. I stepped back. The lights above shifted to a soft, warmer tone. My staff entered, politely inviting everyone to the evening banquet, but no one stood up immediately. My father was the first to break the long silence. "Savannah, I have no excuses. But I need to ask. Why didn't you say anything before?" I looked at him, candidly. "Because when I had nothing, none of you would listen. And now that I have everything, I no longer need to explain." Some looked down. Others quietly folded the invoice, slipping it into their coat pockets. A souvenir of a costly lesson they'd never forget. I turned and walked toward the garden doors. The soft amber lights filtered through olive trees. The night air was cool. I said nothing more. I didn't need to. Because from now on, every time they mention that reunion, they'll remember. Savannah didn't fight for a seat at the family table. She built a house. And made them walk through a gate she designed. After the final speech, I didn't return to the hall right away. I stepped straight onto the rooftop balcony, where the night wind swept through my hair like a cleansing breeze. In the distance, the lights of Denver glittered, stretched out like a galaxy within reach. I had once seen this city from ground level, with scraped hands hauling luggage. Now, I looked down from the highest point I had built myself. A knock sounded behind me. I didn't need to turn to know who it was. My father. Richard Worthington. The man who once barred me from his boardroom for not being qualified. He stood there in a black suit, no longer looking powerful. His face was drawn, pale, and in his eyes lingered something I had never seen before. Confusion. Maybe shame. Possibly regret. "Savannah," he said hoarsely. "I need to talk." I didn't turn right away. I let him stand there for a few seconds, in the open air, where no throne could protect him from the loneliness. "I've heard enough, Dad. What else is there to say?" "I was wrong," he said slowly, each word falling like bricks from a crumbling wall. "I turned a blind eye to your efforts. I stayed silent when they mocked you, and worse. I let you face the world alone. Without a single word of recognition." I turned back. My eyes were dry, my anger long gone. I was just a woman now, standing before the man who once made her doubt herself. "Do you know what hurt me most? Not that you didn't believe I would succeed, but that you never cared why I was trying so hard." He bowed his head. A heavy silence draped over the rooftop. I stepped inside and pulled an envelope from the drawer. Inside was a list of 21 presidential suites at resorts I owned, from Aspen, New York, Palm Springs, all the way to Cape Cod. I handed it to him. "These are some of the most beautiful places I've built. Some are perched on snowy peaks. Some sit in the desert. Some are places where I cried from financial pressure and almost gave up. You may choose any one of them to stay in, for as long as you need." He looked at me surprised. "For what?" "To think. To decide if you truly want to start over. Not with the Savannah you once imagined, but with the woman standing here now. If the answer is yes, then the door is still open. But this time, I won't be walking into your world. You'll have to enter mine. I didn't need him to beg. I didn't need tears or hollow promises. I needed action. And if he truly wanted redemption, then this was his last chance. To act with sincerity, not authority. My father took the envelope, nodded slightly. He said nothing more, turned away. His shoulders slouched, his steps no longer firm. The door closed behind him in an unfamiliar silence. I returned to the balcony. Below, sapphire hills still glowed brightly. My family members now wandered the illuminated garden, some murmuring among themselves, others trying not to show their discomfort. I knew the event tonight would be remembered at future reunions as a milestone, but not as an elegant evening at a luxury resort. It would be remembered as the night the illusions were stripped away. The night Savannah, the girl once erased from family photos for cleaning rooms, stood tall in the very world that once shut her out, and opened a new gate, brighter, straighter, for herself. My phone buzzed, a message from Marcus. I've finished the final report. Everyone received their invoice and they're doing some self-reflection. A few asked to follow up later. They're afraid, but won't admit it. How should I respond? I typed back. Let them wait. I'm not on standby anymore. A strong gust of wind swept through, carrying the scent of pine and the warm notes of incense from the hotel. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath. My heart no longer trembled. For the first time in years, I felt whole. Not because I had defeated them, but because I no longer needed them. I stood there, at the highest point of the empire I had built with faith and flesh. Not to look down on them, but to look forward. Beyond the darkness of the night, a new chapter was opening. And this time, I was the one writing every line. Savannah's story is a powerful reminder that being underestimated can become fuel, and that those once pushed aside can build a world where they never have to be excluded again. From a girl dismissed by her family for choosing to clean hotel rooms, Savannah quietly built a global hospitality empire. Recognition didn't come from praise, but from forcing others to face an undeniable legacy. And sometimes forgiveness isn't forgetting, it's setting conditions, then moving forward. What do you think of Savannah's journey? Would you have forgiven like she did, or chosen a different path? Share your thoughts below. And don't forget to follow the channel so you don't miss more emotional, surprising, and thought-provoking family stories to come.